بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Your Excellency Abdullah bin Togel Merri, UAE Minister of Economy. Major Mohammed Ahmed El Merri, General Manager of General Directorate of Residency and Foreigners Affairs. Your Excellency Dr. Talal Abu Ghazala, the Chairman and Founder of Talal Abu Ghazala Global Organization. Distinguished guests, valued sponsors, dear speakers, good morning. On behalf of the United Arab Emirates Internal Auditors Association, I thank you for attending the 9th Chief Audit Executive 3D Virtual Conference, which has the theme of Connecting Opportunities. We hope that you will enjoy this innovative conference, which will provide an engaging journey with 3D virtual technology, rich with insights for internal auditors at every level. Announcing the launch of JITEX Technology Week on Saturday, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President and Prime Minister of the UAE and ruler of Dubai, said, JITEX will be the most important technology event in 2020. The UAE will be the fastest country in the world to recover, and our institutions have proven their ability to adapt. Sheikh Mohammed tweeted, "We will conclude 2020 with a global event, and we will start 2021 with a series of projects and major initiatives. 2021 will be our 50th year and our golden jubilee, and it will be different from all years," he said. Abiding by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum's vision, we at UAE Internal Auditors Association are going to follow this vision and conduct our events and activities and physically and virtually starting from January 2021. With the new norm, the UAE Internal Auditors Association has been able to adapt, and the best person to shed light on them is the chairman of the board, Mr. Abdul Qadir Abeid Ali. So ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Mr. Abdul Qadir Abeid Ali. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. And I would like to welcome all of you, but first I would like to give a special thanks for the patronage of His Excellency Abdullah bin Togel, UAE Minister of Economy, for our 9th conference. This is really a special conference. This is the first conference for the Chief Audit Executive, where we're really looking at connecting opportunities. The theme really says it all. 2020 was a difficult year, not for us, but for the whole world. However, we are always here looking on the positive side of things. And as such, we want to make sure that we are always looking at new opportunities to make sure that we can pass this 2020 and welcome 2021 with an optimistic view that things is going to change. We are really glad to trying to have today more than 240 delegates from 17 countries joining us today. And by this, really, this is, being a virtual conference. And for the Chief Audit Executive, we are very fortunate to have this number of delegates and to have some eminent speakers being with us in here who are going to share their thoughts of what happened in 2020 and what we are looking forward in 2021. Yes, IIA UAE was no difference. We did have our challenges this year. However, when we look at this challenge, we really had more of what we need to do to be able together to actually move out of this challenge. In the beginning of the year, if some of you recall, we had really a focus group with 2 chief audit executive groups. One was really in the private side and one was really in the government side. And the purpose of that is to try to understand the challenges that they are facing in terms of what do they see that they needed to be changed, and put all that in a white paper, where we have issued that white paper for all of our members, and it was also issued globally. Because we always look at our leadership. And in here, when we talk about audit, we have to actually look at the chief audit executive and see how we can help them. Yes, things were actually in a lockdown. However, we always looked into the opportunities. We've noticed that technology, and especially being digital, was one of the really the biggest asset to us. We were ready with this, and as such, we were able to actually give more than 420 CPEs this year. Not only that, almost 18 CPEs and 18 CPEs were given free in 13 sessions, to make sure that even though that it was a very hard time, we ensured that our members would enjoy having their CPEs, to trying to make sure they can move forward in their requirement. We are looking at the end of 2020. And if you already noticed today what's happening, especially in this particular week, we have one of the biggest events, not only here locally, but actually in terms of the whole world. We in the UAE are always looking forward and seeing how we can change things. And a very good example and a proof of what we are doing is having the GITEX. We really see that I personally have actually visited the GITEX, and I've seen that it is a success, where for the first time you started seeing people. Yes, it was done in the way that social distancing was there. Of course, the place was actually safe to trying to be in, but we all looked forward for that connecting together. And it was really something nice to see some of the big companies being here. More than 1,000 companies were actually represented. So this is what we are not talking about, we are actually doing. Going forward and looking at what we are looking here is, I would like to try and to give you some announcement. As every conference we do, we have an announcement. First of all, we were very glad only about, we've had a meeting with all of our Arab chapters, where we sat down with them, and we had 9 Arab countries join together to trying to make sure that we can collaborate. So the association from 9 Arab countries around us joined together to trying to make sure 2021, we have a year of collaboration with them. And we really, it was one of the good things. And we've decided that every 2 months, we will be having a meeting with them to make sure we can learn from each other and move forward going forward. Now, the first really announcement I would like to talk about is in terms of the quality assurance. We do believe, we are as the auditors in here, quality assurance is very important for us. And as such, we've done 7 quality assurance during 2020. Although it has been a year of difficult, however, we were able to make sure that we did cover the quality assurance, and we did 7 quality assurance. I invite the Chief Audit Executive to connect with us to make sure that we can actually help you with your quality assurance, because it is though it is a mandatory, we do believe all audit department should look and make sure that they are actually in the international guidelines. But the biggest announcement for us to see is that we need to try to let you know that we have actually been able to go ahead and Arabize the quality assurance, okay, where it is, the دليل تقييم الجودة, where we've been able to try to Arabize it in the UAE and publish it for the whole world, because we have seen a need, and this need is very important, not only for the UAE, but for all the Arab countries, to make sure that, especially in the government sectors, that they have this guidance in Arabic to help them improve their own internal processes and be in line with the international guidance. So this is something that we are very proud, and I would like at this moment to really appreciate and thank all of the volunteers who actually worked very hard to make this a reality for us. The second announcement, which I would like to say, and this is a special announcement for us, is to say, we talk about using technology, and one of the technologies that the IIA UAE has actually done is the blockchain. And for the first time, not I'm saying the first time in the UAE or the first time in the Middle East, but the first time in the world that the IIA UAE will be publishing our CPEs on the blockchain. The beauty of the blockchain is that it cannot be counterfeited. And this is in line with governance with us. So we're very proud to announce that we, as the IIA UAE, the first association worldwide to announce that our CPEs will be published on the blockchain. This is something really good news, and I would like to thank the management of the IIA UAE and thank the board and the volunteers who worked very hard to make this a reality. I would like to move to another something very important, something very close to really personally to my heart. This is the special award that we actually have done. It is the leading practice in internal audit. This is the special edition of the leading practice in internal audit, because a lot of people want to know what are the best leading practices. And I believe 5 years ago when we started this leading practice, there was a lot of controversy. Some people were kind of uncomfortable with it, even at the level of the IIA, where they were kind of reserved about having this special award. However, we did have the belief in it, and now we have the full endorsement, not only locally, but also internationally. I'm glad to say that we have received almost 23 applications for this award. And I know a lot of people are eager to trying to see the winners, and I think the winners will be announced tomorrow. I want to say that it's more about sharing best practices in internal audit, because we need to make sure that we can learn from each other. And I urge all the chief audit executives to take this opportunity next year and actually apply for this, because we have seen a lot of benefit out of this. And really at the end, I would like to try and to just say, I really appreciate the support of all the chief audit executive. I'd like to appreciate all our sponsors for actually being here. And a special thanks to all of our speakers who actually put their time and effort to join us to actually share knowledge and how. At the end of the day, on behalf of the board, we'd like to thank you. And I would like at this moment to pass it. And we are all eager to listen to the UAE Minister of Economy. Thank you very much and take care.
Thank you, Mr. Abdelkader, for welcoming the attendees to the conference. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have been honored to have the UAE Minister of Economy, His Excellency Abdullah bin Togh Al Mirri, as the inaugurator of the conference. So I have the pleasure of inviting His Excellency to inaugurate the conference. Your Excellency Abdullah, please go ahead.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. It is indeed a pleasure to address you all at the 9th Annual Chief Audit Executive Conference that aims to connect opportunities by bringing together chief audit executives from the region. If you allow me, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to pinpoint a couple of things in my speech today. In a future filled with uncertainty, whether that to be a sector disruption, changes to the economy, or new technology and automation capabilities, internal audit can bring vision, insight, and knowledge to organizations to help them ensure their strategy is fulfilled. As the UAE accelerates its transition to the new economy through the adoption of a number of innovative policies and measures, excellence in internal auditing has a pivotal role to play in enabling the private sector to maximize its contribution to this transformation. Ladies and gentlemen, let me challenge you with a few questions. What is the future of internal audit? As an organization, hurdle into an increasingly technology-driven, innovation-oriented, risky and disruptive future, where is internal audit? Artificial intelligence, blockchain and data analytics are game changers for both the finance and the accounting sector and the audit profession, transforming the roles of both finance and professionals and auditors. Innovation changes the business model. Internal audit not only must respond to these changes, but also must innovate itself. It is equally important for the internal audit to develop a coherent vision for both the profession and the function. Such a vision is essential in order to drive deep changes and prioritize initiatives for the function and the organization as a whole. So we need to ask ourselves, what is the next generation of internal auditing, and are you ready? Leading organizations around the world are investing in managing information and developing predictive insights to drive sustainable business results. These companies are going beyond mere users of business intelligence to become the intelligent enterprises, using lots of advanced solutions. So how to audit new business model risks? Cloud computing is transforming business IT services, but also poses a significant risk that need to be planned for. How to audit the cloud? Is the existing audit risk assessment process flexible enough to adopt these advanced transformations? Distinguished guests, no doubt the profound impact of the current global economical downturn has left organizations around the world looking for new ways to cut down costs, improve efficiencies, and maintain customer satisfaction levels, all while also protecting their balance sheets. Therefore, it is safe to assume that this unprecedented economic crisis is an urgent call to action for more proactive and innovative risk management practices across organizations, regardless of their size or industry. Let us remember that every crisis, although it presents numerous challenges, it's also an opportunity to take a fresh look at a traditional function and explore ways to execute them differently. The UAE has always remained at the forefront in the adoption of latest and best technologies, policies, and processes in every area of operations. Against this backdrop today, gathering of top leaders and chief executives in the field of internal auditing presents an ideal platform to ask the hard questions to prepare for the future of auditing. I look forward to its outcome and their impact in enhancing the UAE private sector competitiveness in the post-COVID phase. I hope all you benefit from this session and looking forward to hearing from you on the next 2 days of engagements and the connectivity of the future of the internal audit. Thank you very much.
Before we begin the first session, I'd like to highlight the following. English to Arabic translation will be provided on spot. After each session, you will find polling survey questions, which we hope that it will be responded to in order to get your feedback for areas for improvement. Kindly note that the last speaker on the second day will be Tim Berishon, who is the Managing Director of Chief Audit Executive Services and Insights and Intelligence at IA Global. We have been able to get 25 ebooks written by Tim. There will be a raffle draw on the ebook, which is considered to be one of the best-selling ebooks. Ready and relevant, prepare to audit what matters most. The ebooks will be sent to the winners at the end of the conference. During the sessions, if you have any questions, kindly submit them through the Q&A Dropbox, and at the end of the sessions, the speakers will respond to them. Now, the first keynote speaker today is His Excellency Dr. Talal Abu Ghazala. He is the chairman and founder of the international Jordan-based organization, the Talal Abu Ghazala Global Organization, which is a leading provider of professional and educational services with more than 100 offices worldwide. Recognized as one of the most influential leaders in the world, with lifetime achievements, distinctions, and outstanding contributions to education, accountancy, intellectual property, business administration and management, commerce, ICT, science and technology, law, and other fields. A builder of institutions with a sense of history and a vision for the renaissance of the Arab and Islamic worlds. Today, Dr. Talal will be talking about the internal control system before the internal audit and the external audit. Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin now His Excellency Dr. Talal Abu Ghazala's session, as this is going to be a recorded session. Therefore, there is no need to submit any questions.
Good morning. I am honored and pleased to be part of this very important event under the patronage of His Excellency Abdullah bin Toq Al-Marri, the Minister of Economy and Cabinet Member. Thank you for your patronage and thank you for your support. I also want to express my gratitude for being invited by our organizer, His Excellency Abdul Qadir Ubaid Al Ali, the chairman of the UAE IAA board. And it's so good to be among my colleagues in the profession, accountancy profession and auditing profession. I am honored to belong to this most honorable community. I take pride always claiming that in my former life and until now, I am an accountant. So it's good to be with you and a pleasure and honor to be part of your community. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope you will not regret it after you will hear what I have to say, because I want to be very candid and transparent. I want to warn you that my presentation is one of self-criticism. When I criticize the profession, accountancy profession, I am also criticizing myself. I started as an accountant in 1960, and I had my first practice license in accounting in Kuwait in 1965 as an auditor and as a member of the Association of Kuwaiti Accountants. And I was proud to be presented with their shield of recognition, which I cherish very much. Since then, I have been very interested in not only the actual performance of the profession, but in its future. And my talk today is about the future. Unfortunately, we have problems in our profession. And I remember when I was elected, the first Arab to be elected to the board of the International Federation of Accountants, and that was in '92. One of the members, it was a board of something like 15 members representing the major accounting firms, and there were 8 at that time. They were called the Big 8. Now they are the Big 4. I was, one member criticized me because on my profile, I mentioned that I am a businessman. And he said, this is not acceptable. We are not businessmen, we are accountants. Ours is not a business, it's a profession. And I tried to explain that any profession is a business. And I was asked to change my title to become public accountant instead of businessman. And that took a debate at the board. And I'm sure they were looking down upon me, this man coming from the developing world, trying to tell us what accountancy is, and insisting on changing our image as a very special group of people. Accountants used to look at themselves, not so much now, but in the past, they used to look at themselves as a special breed of human beings. They are not like everybody. They are professionals. And this led to a problem of conservatism. Accountants, by definition, are very conservative. They are very difficult to change, and they believe that what is in the book is in the book, and it has to remain as such. Anyway, I refused to change my title, but aid came to me eventually in 1996 when the WTO was established. And after many decades of negotiations, and it talked about trade. And they defined accounting as a trade in accounting services. So I produced the agreement, which was binding on every country in the world who is member of the World Trade Organization, that we are traders. We are in business, because if you conduct a transaction providing service or sale and earning money as a result, you are trading. So are the other professions too. The medical profession is defined in the World Trade Agreement as trade in medical services. So everything we do as productivity is a trade. And that's not insulting. And as I tried to explain at that time, if business is something downgrading, we shouldn't be dealing with our clients who are in business. How do we deal with something which is beyond us and below us, and continue to keep our respect for ourselves? Being in business is an honorable thing, and being a businessman is an honorable thing. Now that was the shocking start for me, as I refused, but in spite of that, they didn't like it. And when the ruling came by WTO, I was vindicated. Now, I have had many such problems in my career and my relationship with the international community of accountants. I remember that when we were in our first meeting, the chairman of the meeting said, and that was when I was on the board of the International Federation of Accountants, as I said, in '92, he said, we have here, our business is about accounting standards, one, which means how to keep the books, what rules and should be applied in record keeping and producing the financial results, and in auditing standards, which meant how to audit and check what the work of the accountant resulted in. And he said, and accounting standards and auditing guidelines. I asked, why are we talking about standards in accounting, in bookkeeping, and guidelines in reference to auditing? Shouldn't we talk about standards of auditing as just like we talk about standards in accounting? Everybody was unhappy, to say the least, that I made this provocative statement, as they thought, because, and I said, why? They said, because it is so in the Constitution. In our Constitution and in our rules, we have auditing guidelines and accounting standards. I said, does that mean that auditing guidelines are less imperative and less mandatory than the standards, because a standard is a higher thing than a guideline? The chairman was fed up with me, and he said, any seconding for this discussion? And it was no. So, end of discussion. I didn't give up. I managed to lobby for the next meeting to get one person to agree that we should discuss this subject. To make a long story short, it took me 1 year to change this. And now we're talking about auditing standards and accounting standards. Another problem I had was with what is the object or purpose of accounting. As I studied it at the American University in Beirut and in the international practicing firms, accounting is about record keeping in order to be able to produce at the end of the year the results of operation and the position, the financial position. And I said, what for? And they all looked at me with open eyes. What do you mean by what for? You don't think that arriving at the results and also producing a status of the financial position is important? I said, of course it is, but it must be for a purpose. And that purpose is decision-making. I think I said we should change this definition of accounting to become that accounting is a tool for economic decision-making. Again, it went through a battle, but finally that was introduced and added to the introduction of the accounting standards, that the objective of accounting is to be a tool for economic decision, because I need to know my position and my results in order to see how I can improve my results of operation and my financial position. I'm telling that this was a battle. These were battles that I fought, and fortunately, I won. But that doesn't apply to everything, because I have failed many times in convincing the accounting profession and the leading accounting firms who take control of the profession. And when I say this, maybe I should have started by submitting my credentials, how I and why I was involved in all of this all throughout my life, and having been able so far to build one of the global accounting firms. In 1995, I was the chair of the UN Conference on Developing Accounting Education. I was asked by the UN in New York to review accounting education. And it was a multi-meeting with all societies of accountants in the world. And I was very pleased to hear the American chief head of the delegation say, education, our education has to change. It does not serve the needs of the time. And I said, you mean as chair? I said, you mean to be developed? He said, no, it has to be changed. It's no good. That was a very encouraging statement. And I thought that this should mean that there is potential for change. In '95 also, the UN Secretary General appointed me as chair of UN Working Group of Experts on International Standards of Accounting and Reporting, which is called United Nations ISAR, International Standards on Accounting and Reporting. And that paper or that report was adopted. We finished it in 1 year. And among the other positions, I'm only talking about positions at the UN now. I have also been elected in 1988 to 90 to the board of the IFRS, which at that time was called IASC, International Accounting Standards Committee. Now it is called the International Financial Reporting and Standards Committee. And I also served on the board of, as I said, the Federation of Accountants, and I also chaired the UN Group on Standards of Accounting and Reporting in 1995. In 1999, I was appointed to chair a task force on environmental accounting. And there I failed. Because after we developed a whole set of standards to bring accounting firms to accountability and to bring companies, operating companies, to accountability by asking the auditors and the accountants to make sure that the disruption by any company to the environment should be reflected in the results so that they should be accountable for it. When we finished that report, it was dismissed by the powers that control what was called, what at the meeting, in fact, that was a historic meeting because once we finished the meeting, I was told that the US ambassador and the British ambassador wanted to join the meeting. It was the final meeting to announce the product. And again, to make a long story short, they both said that this is a waste of time. We will not allow such a standard. You cannot have a standard on accountability, and we will have to, in all cases, we would like to tell you that your decision is meaningless unless it is adopted by the capital, the stock and the financial markets capital, which of course meant Washington. So that was shelved. Another failure I have met with was when I tried to implement a certain level of accountability in introducing a certain level of knowledge and fluency in ICT. I said that we are because in another capacity, I was the chairman of UN ICT task force for designing the future of information technology and telecommunication at the UN. And I said, it is time that accountants also look at ICT in their accounting and in their auditing practice. It took a lot of time. And finally, all I could get is a committee to study management accounting based on information technology. Now, and why I'm saying all of this, I'm saying because the profession is very slow to develop and react to change. And that is something that I worry about. We are now in an era we are starting the knowledge revolution. We are at the start of the knowledge revolution. And there is a lot of things that need to change. But first, let me focus on the three tracks that relate to this subject. One is accounting and accounting standards, auditing and auditing standards, internal audit, no standards. And this is the theme of my presentation. I think we lack the formulation of rules, internationally accepted standards on internal audit. And I want to go one step before the process of internal audit, which is very important. I believe that we certainly need a standard setting body globally, and let it be established by the International Federation of Accountants and the International Financial and Reporting Standards Committee to have a task force to develop standards on internal auditing. There is a wonderful association of internal auditors, but it's a membership group. It does not have a mandatory or forceful authority in developing and imposing standards on internal audit, which we need. But what we need more is standards on internal control. And my emphasis here is it's great to audit whether internal or external and discover discrepancies, but it would be much better if you can avoid discrepancies. When I talk about internal control, I talk about preventive or preemptive requirements so that when you come to audit or to internally audit, external audit, internal audit, you will find less violations and less discrepancies and less abuse. It's the idea of whether treatment is the only solution or whether treatment is a good solution, but preventive medicine is also a good solution. Internal control, which we refer to sometimes as checks and balances, is how the authorities and the responsibilities within the organization are structured. A very simple example, he who prepares the check or is the treasurer cannot be the person who authorizes the payment. In other words, division of responsibilities and what we call internal control requirements are as important, if not more important, than doing a lot of auditing and a lot of external and internal auditing and continuing to find the violations. I don't think that a businessman or an investor or whatever is more concerned about finding what is wrong than making sure that there is no wrong. It is better to stop a crime, to make it difficult for a crime to happen in life, than to make it easy and discover the criminal and punish him. So I am giving very primitive parallel in saying that internal control should be a basic requirement in the process of accounting. Therefore, I am calling on the establishment of an internal control international committee that would develop rules and standards for how to maintain the highest possible internal control system, which provides the highest control against violations. This is something that is badly needed. And I think that the profession should do that. And I call on 3 parties that can possibly be involved in this. The major accounting firms, auditing firms, all 4 of them could develop a task force and make recommendations on establishing such an authority. Another alternative is for the associations of accountants, namely the major standard setting bodies in the world, like IFAC, of course, and IFSR. And these already existing standard setting bodies can work out, establish a task force and work out such a solution. Thirdly, like what happened at the UN, for the UN Secretary General to mandate a committee on developing internal control standards. And I intend to write to all these 3 and see who would volunteer and help with that. I think any organization, any businessman would love to see better control and less violations of all kinds than discovering the violations. This is something that is badly needing. In our own organization, I have already formed a task force in Talal Abu Ghazali International that would develop standards and rules for internal control, which we would comply with in our audit of our clients. So instead of looking at the items and discuss and verifying them, we will look at the internal control system and report on it as well. So we will develop internally for our use a set of internal control standards, and in our audit of our clients, we will review the adequacy of the internal controls in order to advise our clients on better internal control for better safety. I already suggested that the world is going into a knowledge revolution where everything is going to be ICT based and artificial intelligence enabled. If we try to be sincere and honest with ourselves, our profession is not up to date on this. Most of us find that our clients are ahead of us in adopting and implementing ICT technologies in the preparation of the accounts and in their production of the financial statements. I think the profession needs to realize that this disruptive technology is disruptive our services unless we are able to adapt to the great progress that is happening in the field of accounting. And I'm sorry and sad to say that unless we do something, there will be no accounting profession. And it's as bad as that. Because why? Why do I need an accountant who knows the rules of accounting to check in an environment of ICT where I can have an audit program that includes all the required standards and just plug it into the accounting system of the client, and the program will do the audit much better than somebody who is checking the papers and the documents. In future, if we don't change, a new profession will take over from us, and this is the profession of tech audit programs. And I have announced a few months ago that we have started at Talal Abu Ghazali International developing what we call tag tech audit. The concept is that everything we can do manually, we can do now ICT enabled. So if we can, the role of the auditor in future will be to develop the best program that can do the audit, and the auditor, all he has to do is to take the results of this program, which can include every audit procedure we want, and will do the job for the auditor while he is in his office on the client's books and records, which are all digital. And our added value would be in analyzing and helping making the results useful for economic decision making. Back to my first statement that the object of accounting should be to help in economic decision making. Now, if we don't do that, and if we don't develop our audit practice methodology, which is now absolutely out of date, if we don't develop that, a group of technicians will take over the auditing profession because the standards are there, the audit program is there. All we need to do is to compete, and the competition between accounting firms in future will be on who produces the better or creates the better tech auditor. And I mean that this machine, this program, this tool will become the auditor instead of me. My job is to create it in a way that can function as good as it's possible. And the competition will be in who is who is a better auditor physically as a person, but who has the better program that can do the job digitally and in full compliance with all the standards in the world that you can input in this program. Another problem we have to address, and again, going to my start, I was in 1990, I have at least 15, I chaired and led at least 15 task forces at the UN and in the accounting profession internationally. And I said in the beginning that we needed to have a view of changing education. And what I'm talking about is changing education. Like in 1995, when I chaired the international conference at the United Nations in New York for change in education. Now I'm calling for this change in education to be digitally based for digital performance in a knowledge environment. That was and still is the need, and education is a continuous process, continuous change process, and we shouldn't be upset if we need to constantly change our approach. Last point. It is unacceptable that until this date, the great founding fathers of the profession do not recognize the qualifications of each other. And again, I was commissioned by the UN to chair a committee on the harmonization of professional qualifications. And we worked for many years. And the product was failure. It is absurd that the CPA, the AICPA, the Association of Certified Accountants, and the ICC, the British Association of Accountants, do not recognize each other's qualifications. In this world of interacted relations and interaction of business interest, and in what we used to enjoy and call globalization, when everything is being globalized, we need to have the accounting profession globalized, not just by standards, but by rules of operation. And one of these rules of international operations. I cannot understand why a chartered accountant in the UK, a great profession, or in Canada, or any of the great Australia, or any of the great accounting associations of the world, cannot practice in the US and vice versa. the fact that we need to have harmonization and recognition of accounting qualifications is badly needed. And I tried to address it. I tried to address it on many occasions, in many of my assignments at the international accounting world or at the United Nations. The problem is how to. And I made a proposal, which I think needs still to be addressed and studied. I said, let us take the highest standard in every one of these major accounting qualifications requirements and use it as a benchmark. This means that we will take whatever is higher among all the qualifications as a requirement and make it as the standard. Even that approach was not acceptable to the professional bodies. That goes back again to my beginning, where we are so conservative that we don't think that there is anybody like us. Not only among our business community and our neighborhood, but also between us as members of the same profession. Every member of a profession or professional society thinks he is the best and his society is the best, and everybody else comes as second rate. We need a lot of standardization. We need a lot of change in education. And if we want, and as I said at the UN, if we need to have what the committee I chaired was called Harmonization of Professional Qualifications Task Force. If we needed that, we need to be sure that we start with education, because there should be a standard on accounting education, on auditing education. Okay, and therefore, this process of harmonization has to start with agreeing on basic education requirements as a standard, basic experience and continuous education requirements, in addition to all what any of the societies makes it a requirement for a practitioner to continue to practice. I am not very optimistic, but I also don't give up easily. I keep trying. Sometimes I succeed. And when I don't succeed, I blame only myself, because I would say to myself, I've made my presentation wrongly. I should have done it differently, and I will keep doing it differently, because there is always a better way to making your point. In closing, I think this conference can do a great contribution to humanity and to business. If you set up a team that would look into all the problems that we have, especially, and I say this out of love, especially that many of our great accounting firms in the world are under scrutiny for serious violations. In order to keep the great reputation of accountancy profession, we need to look at our problems and to respect, and in respect, review whatever criticism is being made against us by authorities, governmental, and by the business community. I think a task force of eminent accountants or accounting firms from the globe, led by the US associations of accountants, the AICPA, or by Britain's Chartered Institute of Accountants, or by both of them, or by a group to review the status of the accounting profession, where it is and where it is going and where it should be going, and how and what we need to do in order to protect our profession and protect our reputation and respect in the world. Thank you very much.
Thanks to His Excellency for such an informative session. We completely agree that the world is going through knowledge revolution in ICT, and it is ICT based, and we have to adapt. Thank you very much, Dr. Talal Abu Ghazala, for such an informative and inspiring session. Ladies and gentlemen, our next session is sponsored by Protivity, which is also the platinum sponsor of the conference. During this session, Abdullah Al-Anizi, who is the Group Chief Audit Executive of Saudi Telecom, and Amit Ray, who is the Managing Director and Solution Leader, Data Analytics and Digital Transformation at Protivity, as they will discuss implementing a sustainable continuous controls monitoring solution. It is a case study of a large telecommunication group. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Abdullah Al-Anizi and Amit Ray.
So thank you very much, Samia, for the very nice introduction. Good morning to everyone who's taking time out this morning to attend the session today. We are very pleased and always happy to be back at the CAE conference. This is my fifth time speaking. This time it's a little different. Obviously, it's a bummer that I don't get the opportunity to interact with a lot of you in person. But nevertheless, this has been our way of life for the last obviously about 9 odd months. So without further ado, and also, I'm humbled and privileged and honored to be accompanied and sharing the same platform with Mr. Abdullah Al-Anizi, who is a very well-respected member in the internal audit fraternity, very well-known, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He leads the internal audit function at Saudi Telecommunications Company, with one of the largest internal audit functions in the region. So I think the topic this morning is our story with Saudi Telecommunications Company and our journey together as we implemented a continuous controls monitoring solution. And instead of talking theories, we felt that it would be good to share a client story, and that's why we took this approach. But before we get into what continuous controls monitoring is all about and why we need to look at that as an option, I wanted to set a little bit of a context, right? And a little bit of background as to how next gen of internal audit may look like. With 2020 almost in the rearview mirror, and what a year it has been, right, for all of us. And I think none of us can claim to have been untouched with the events that have been unfolding around us, with our families, with our friends, with our workplace, entertainment, school, globally. Everybody has been touched in one way or the other. And hence, the 2021 Audit Committee agenda is also shaping up very differently than in the years of the past. Top of the list is ensuring companies are resilient and agile enough to withstand whatever surprises the next 12 months may have in store. If necessity is the mother of invention, COVID 19 forced many around the world to rethink our daily lives from work to school to entertainment. It has been imperative to digitally transform every aspect of our lives to be able to operate with some semblance of normalcy. On the same vein, if we look at what's happening in organizations around us, organizations that have been able to adapt, evolve, and transform and rethink their business model through leveraging digital, through leveraging data, by fast tracking digital transformation, has been ahead of their competition. Now, businesses get disrupted as they embrace innovation economy, which in turn is challenging the internal audit functions to stay relevant. Now, internal audit needs to respond to these organizational changes in order to ensure that it can help manage risk and add value and stay relevant in this new paradigm. As you ponder upon the questions that's outlined in this slide, the risk of inaction for internal audit today is much higher than ever before, right? So we are faced with two choices essentially, either disrupt or be disrupted. Now, if you reflect on the questions here, I mean, it doesn't only talk about leveraging technology or leveraging data. It also touches upon the aspects of people, governance, and methodology, and the need to challenge the status quo in all of those dimensions. So at Protivity, when we look at next gen of internal audit, we don't like to lead with technology, and that's oftentimes the temptation, to pick up some shiny tools in the market and feel that they will somehow create magic for us and change the way we do things. But unfortunately, that's not how it happens, right? So when we look at transforming your internal audit function and enabling it with emerging tech and making it ready to kind of look at the new and emerging risks, we need to look at governance, we need to look at methodology, as well as we need to look at enabling technology, and specifically in that order. So when we talk about governance, what essentially we are talking about is how do we embed innovation and design thinking as a way of life? How do we embed an agile mindset? How do we convert a traditionally risk averse, sort of a mindset into something that's not afraid to embrace failure, right? And that's becoming more and more important. What are the skill sets of the auditors of the future, right? Now, typically, certain skill sets that were considered as technical will become more and more core and mainstream as we go forward. And as we try to bring in new talents and new sort of skills within the internal audit function, it will be imperative to look at flexible staffing models. It will be imperative to look at how do you rotate, staff from the business within the internal audit team and vice versa, right? So those are some of the aspects, excuse me, around governance. Now, with regards to methodology, internal audit has been doing the same things for several years in almost the same way. Now, if I take an example of risk assessment, a traditional approach to risk assessment is a point-in-time risk assessment. Now, given the dynamic nature of the business and the disruptions that we see around us, a point-in-time risk assessment at the beginning of the year may not be an appropriate approach in all the cases. A dynamic risk assessment allows you the flexibility to reassess and reevaluate your risks as you move through the year and recalibrate your plan and focus accordingly. An agile audit approach allows you to embed agile framework as opposed to a waterfall model that traditionally all audit projects tend to follow. And agile has been doing wonders in the technology field. It's time for internal audit to embrace and see the benefits of that as well. The basic fundamental of agile is how do you look at short sprints, look at quick wins instead of one big project. right? Now, if I look at high impact reporting as another area, right, in today's fast moving environment, timely communication of quality and actionable information is key. Long narrative based reporting, which was traditionally the forte within internal audit, needs to be re examined. A lot of the innovative internal audit functions that we are talking to and working with have started delivering reports and in terms of interactive graphic rich formats to deliver maximum impact through user intuitive dashboards, content that can be visualized on various sorts of mobile devices, and so on and so forth. And obviously, continuous monitoring allows us to be more proactive and more real time in the way we assess, monitor, and mitigate risks. And we'll talk a lot about it during the course of this presentation. And as we move on to the enabling technology, to kind of reiterate my first point, that should be a means to an end. That should be a means to serve your methodology changes and your governance changes, not the other way around, right? The key thing is, how do you leverage enterprise data across the board for everything that you do? How do you leverage automation to kind of look at the non-value adding tactical repetitive tasks that oftentimes internal auditors get sucked into, whereby not being able to focus on more strategic and value adding tasks, right? And that's the role automation and data can play. However, technology cannot be just dropped into your old way of doing things, and that doesn't help, because that will only give you an impression that we are trying to change things, whereas fundamentally we haven't. Right now, what does that mean? If you look at this slide, what we try to do here is we try to look at how does a day in the life of an internal auditor looks like, right? And what are the different kinds of tasks or activities an internal audit team member would be doing on a day-to-day basis. So you would be either focusing on assessing risks within the enterprise or planning, or you would be focused on working with the management and the stakeholders to understand the processes, or you would be actually conducting the field work of the controls testing, and finally reporting and follow-up. Now, if you look at some of the examples mentioned here, they talk about various possible use cases and applications of technology and emerging digital tools that can help you do each of these things better, smarter, and faster. Now, one doesn't have to try all of it, right? But you have a plethora of opportunities available to make everything that you do more efficient, right? Just to take a few examples in the interest of time, if you look at risk assessment, obviously, some organizations have been data driven for several years now, while others still base it on subjective workshops and interviews. A good way to look at how do you use past historical data from your own audit reports, from the past risks in the risk registers, from the observations of the past years, is a good way to look at how do you prioritize the future. We have looked at organizations like telecommunications, banking, retail, which are inherently data rich, including energy and utilities sector as well. Uh, a lot of the internal audit functions often tend to look at huge volumes of data to look at different business units, or let's say in cases of banks, different branches, for example, or different stores in the cases of a retail organization. And this high level assessment based on data gives them some telltale indicators of which ones to pick up for audit, right? And here you are trying to identify risks based on data, not based on subjective or qualitative assessment. Social intelligence is another area that's picking up quite fast, whereby you can gather unstructured data that's available in the social media, right? And when we talk about social media, it doesn't necessarily have to be the internet. It could be your intranet as well. It could be looking at how your employees or suppliers or vendors are talking to each other, or customers, how are they giving you feedback? And taking some of those inputs, and there are tools available that can make sense of this unstructured data that's available all around us in various applications in various forms. Mind you, most of these do not reside in your traditional IT systems. However, there are tools and technologies that can make this data available for you to assess risks. Now, if you go to planning and sample selection, obviously there's a lot of different methods, both statistical and analytical, that can help you apply sampling in a more scientific way. If you're dealing with physical documentation, optical character recognition techniques or intelligent document processing techniques have evolved to an extent that you can digitize a lot of information that typically would have to be otherwise manually reviewed. If you look at process walkthrough, and this is where a lot of innovation is happening within the internal audit space, within the emerging tech space, instead of depending on a process owner or an outdated document to understand the process, there are tools available today that can collect the digital footprints of every process from your core IT systems like your ERP, your CRM, your core operational systems, and rebuild the process narrative for you. And that's what process finding is all about. If you're an organization that deals with a lot of voice communication with your customers, for example, like in a banking sector or a telecommunication sector, there are voice analytics tools that help you assess and analyze all conversations as compared to looking at specific samples. Virtual inspection or drone-based technologies have been now being used for inventory, for physical inspection, especially in real estate and construction areas, and it has made lives a lot simpler. Imagine an auditor having to go and do a physical inspection in the middle of the desert at 50 degrees centigrade, right? Today, you can send a drone, take a video and images, and analyze that in the back office for health and safety requirements, for structural integrity requirements, for other compliance and process deviation sort of requirements. Controls testing, again, this is where a lot of action is happening on the ground, and a lot of the organizations that we see who have started innovating and applying emerging tech in their day-to-day starts here, right? Because some of these are quick wins, right? We'll talk a lot about how we use continuous monitoring and data analytics to do what you do faster, better, smarter, right? Robotic process automation is another area that has been picking up, especially to automate a lot of the tactical, repetitive processes that does not necessarily need subjective judgment or intelligence, right? And finally, on reporting and follow-up, obviously, there's a trend to move towards more interactive, graphically rich, multimedia-based reporting, like dashboards, interactive workflows, as opposed to static, long narrative reporting like we talked about. There are developments happening in the natural language processing based report writing as well, where you know uh, machine learning or AI can actually, based on the outcomes of analytics, can phrase the first set of observation for you, right? These are not perfect still, but a lot is happening in this field and something to look out for. And if you're wondering why we have titled the slide Internal Audit 4.0, and a lot of you would be familiar with the Industry 4.0 revolution. And the way we would like to think of it is, while Industry 4.0 is revolutionizing every aspect of the business, no matter which industry you are a part of, there is no reason why some of those tools and technologies cannot be embraced and imbibed within the internal audit practice as well, right? Now, this is kind of a very broad overview of how do we see next-gen audit, and this one focuses a little bit more on the enabling technologies bit. Now, let's zoom in a little bit further on continuous monitoring and try to understand what continuous controls monitoring is all about. When we talk about continuous controls monitoring, or CCM, the way we abbreviate it, we essentially are talking about how do we automate the data extraction, cleansing from multiple structured and unstructured data sources. Today, as auditors, even if you have tools and even if you have the skill sets to do analytics, oftentimes we struggle to get the right source of information. In time, complete, accurate, quality, something that you can rely on. And oftentimes you go back and forth with your IT and process teams to get the right information. And by the time you are able to massage it, cleanse it, find anything meaningful out of it, you've spent a sufficient amount of your audit budget already, right? So the time that you actually end up spending doing root cause investigation and analysis is actually far lesser than the time we end up spending in collecting, managing, and accessing data. Now, one of the greatest advantages of having continuous controls monitoring in place is all of this can be automated, right? Yes, there is some heavy lifting to start with, to set up the connections, to set up the operating procedures with your technology teams. But once that is done, it's a one-time investment, right? And then you have access to all the data all the time. Now, once you have the data, the next step is to apply business rules on the extracted data, right? To detect exceptions, anomalies, outliers. And these business rules typically would be flexible so that as your processes change, you're able to update, upgrade, and change the business rules as you go on. And then once you've looked at the initial set of exceptions, you would find there are false positives, right? And then you would need to apply analytical methods, AI or machine learning, including human input, which is what we call supervised learning, right? An experienced auditor would find the false positives and feed it back into the system so that over a period of time, the rules become more and more intelligent. And then you start publishing alerts and exceptions in user-friendly, intuitive graphic dashboards. And finally, those dashboards, along with the various other features that are typically available in such tools, will allow you to drill down, do root cause investigation, and potentially unlock value and drive action within the business, right? Now, why should you consider doing all of this? The benefits are quite obvious, right? So one is obviously you would like to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of the function, right? So you want to do more with less, and that's the mantra essentially these days. Obviously, the second aspect is increase the depth and the breadth of coverage, right? So instead of doing a check once a year or once every 2 years, now you can run the high risk checks every month, if you like, every quarter, every fortnight, depending on what's your risk appetite, right? And that also means that you're detecting risks proactively on a continuous basis, which means that the time that you have to fix an issue uh, is a lot more today, right? Finding something after the fact when it's too late doesn't really add a lot of value to the business. But if you're able to find issues or early warning indicators in time, for you to be able to go and make a difference to your customer, to your supplier, to your vendor, to your internal operations, that adds a lot of value, right? And finally, this is one of my favorites, right? So when you apply analytics, you tend to discover a lot of unknown unknowns. Now, what do I mean by that? Typically, as internal auditors, we tend to kind of work based on RCMs and work programs, right? So the fundamental premise there is we know what can go wrong, right? But if you look at some of the major issues that we oftentimes come across, we never expected them to happen, right? So it's important, while it's important to look at the aspects that we know could go wrong, it's also important to have tools and techniques that can give you indicators of things that you're not even looking for, right? Various analytical methods and techniques allow you to discover those unknown unknowns. And that's probably, as you mature in the CCM journey, this is one of the aspects that really helps you create a differentiation in how you conduct your internal audit. So with that, I would kind of hand over to Mr. Abdullah, and as Protivity, as a firm, we have been fortunate to work with Saudi Telecommunications Company for more than a decade. Our journey of continuous controls monitoring, started about 5 years back, and I don't want to steal the thunder, so I'll let Abdullah talk about the story a little bit, and we'll be happy to take questions at the end. Abdullah, over to you.
Thank you, Amit. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning to everyone. It's an honor speaking to you today. When I took over as STC Group Chief Audit Executive 5.5 years ago, I had an ambition to implement continuous control monitoring system. It was part of a big transformation program with the 3 pillars. The first one was to acquire and retain talent, which is I am blessed and privileged to have an A team of internal auditors. The second is to be more of a strategic focus rather than operational. The third is to use the use of technologies and systems, which is resulted in implementing CCM. In this case study, we will show you the beginning, the infrastructure, how we selected the areas, built the team, the challenges and lessons learned. First, I will start with our vision and mission and also strategy. So we had a vision to become a world-class internal audit function aligned with international standard and best practices to assist STC Group in achieving its objectives. Our mission statement is to protect and enhance STC Group value by providing risk-based and objective assurance, advice, and insight. The second slide, please. Yes. This is our strategy. When we came up with this acronym value, so as an internal audit, we add value to all stakeholders, to the business, to the board, and also we visualize, analyze, automate audit operations. We leverage advanced analytics, tools, and technologies, upskill and inject new talent to keep pace with STC, expand scale and scope. Next slide, please. So when we started looking at into CCM, we have prepared a 3 years implementation roadmap. We have prepared the required infrastructure with all required tools and software to extract the data from multiple resources and then analyze this data. Also, the tools required to disseminate information to users in a user-friendly dashboard. In the beginning of the project, we looked into past audit observation, the risks that are materialized. We have also identified areas and prioritized them based on their first criticality, data availability, and process maturity. We initially started with 2 areas, procure to pay and HR and payroll. The reason we have selected these 2 areas because both areas are transaction heavy with clear policies and standards, and also we can repeat this process periodically. Also, both areas can give us specific financial benefits, and also all exceptions found can be addressed immediately. Our message here is that we did not jump without a clear plan, and we knew from the beginning it is a journey. So all stakeholders, we involve them and should to understand and realize the value, and also get them familiarized with the concept so they can start using the system. Next slide, please. So after we completed the pilot and we saw the benefits with all stakeholders, we started in the pilot with the support functions. Then we moved to phase 2. In phase 2, what we did, we looked into the core of business and also finance modules with a much more holistic view. In phase 2, we have identified 8 areas, as I mentioned in the previous slide, based on their criticality, data availability, and process maturity. And I remember when we came up with these 8 areas, we had a workshop, 3 hours workshop with my team, all directors, all team leaders, and we said, what are the most critical areas? And also provided that the data is available, the process is mature, and there is a clear business rules. So we have selected areas related to customers, customer information assurance, credit control, customer adjustments, in addition to finance areas, which is general ledger, fixed assets, revenue recognition, and inventory, as well as one area related to system rules, which is segregation of duties. And the message, I will not go into details of each area. However, I will highlight 2 areas. One is the general ledger, which helped us a lot in the financial statement review to analyze trends and variances quickly. So initially in the past, if there is any variance in any number, in any account, we spend hours to identify what is the reason behind this variance. Now, with the help of CCM, it's a matter of clicks, and then we can know exactly what is the reason behind this variance. Also, in the segregation of duties, we looked into more than 1,500 rules across ERP modules, and that could not be done without CCM. It's a huge manual work. With the help of CCM, it can be done with the click and also periodically, as I said. In the next slide is about the CCM implementation approach with Amit.
Thanks Abdullah for passing this on. So a little bit about and Abdullah did mention most of it already, but just to kind of summarize that, what is the approach that we took as we went through this journey? And it was very important for us to make sure that we spend the time and effort to plan and assess the maturity of the systems, of data, of existing technology infrastructure. We also spent a lot of time looking at past audit reports, talking to the existing internal audit team who were auditing those areas, and the outcome of which was a clearly laid out plan with very specific rationale as to what we would take in wave one, what we would take in wave two, and how do we kind of scale it up, right? And that's the first stage, which is what we're calling in readiness and maturity assessment. Oftentimes we see organizations jump into kind of CCM or analytics without a proper plan, right? Now, if we pick up an area that does not have the good quality of data, or we would struggle to access the data, or completeness or accuracy of the information is of concern, or the process is evolving, right? It's not stable, it's not mature, it's an area of the business that's less understood, we are setting ourselves for failure. So it was very important for us when we started this journey to pick up areas so that we can show quick wins, we can actually show impact and value to the business, because it was not just about the internal audit function driving and supporting this. And we were fortunate that everybody, including the audit committee, was backing it. But the challenge that we also had was to ensure that the business and the process owners see value in the outcomes from this, right? So we spent a lot of time with all the stakeholders, securing the buy-in, understanding what would be the right areas to pick up. Once we did that, the next step was to kind of roll up our sleeves and get our hands dirty into the actual systems, right? Now, understanding the CRM, understanding the ERP, understanding the billing system, how the data is structured, what should be the specific business rules. And this is where we did a series of workshops and back and forth with the process, with the management, with the internal audit team, getting our SMEs involved from the telecommunications space. For each of the process areas, we nominated process champions to support this exercise. And that's another very important point, right? When you're talking about rolling out a program like this, having just one person who can script an ACL is not going to solve the problem. You would need a team that understands audit, that understands the business, that understands systems, the data structure within those systems, the actual technical requirements of connecting within those systems without impacting the business. And obviously, we were talking about a telecommunications company where billions of call detail records get processed on a real-time basis, right? So we could not afford to do anything that would jeopardize the operational efficiency or the availability of those systems. So all of those aspects are very important. And identifying what sort of analytical rules and techniques would be the appropriate ones to use, whether it's rule-based, whether it's predictive, prescriptive, whether it's diagnostic, whether it's just statistical data that we're trying to look at, what sort of duration is the right duration for us to look at to give accurate outcomes and models. All of those facets get kind of designed here, right? And then the actual implementation of the systems, right? In this particular case, we connected to, 3 or 4 different key systems, right? Obviously, ERP was one of them. There was a central repository for a lot of the customer systems in the data warehouse, but we did connect to several other systems along the way as we did each and every process, right? And then, setting it up, setting the extraction, transformation, and loading of the data, which we call technically ETL, setting up the analytical framework. We used ACL in this case as a base, and then we use other tools like R, etc., on top of it for some of the more advanced analytics. And then the dashboards and the visualizations were done using Tableau, right? So that was the technical backbone of the infrastructure. And one of the most important pieces, if I move along, right, would be setting up the right operating model, the right standard operating procedure. Because what we are trying to do here is changing the very way we actually analyze data in audits, actually look at audit, right? So what happens when you look at the exceptions that come out of the dashboards? Do they become a special report, right? Or do you integrate them as a part of your existing audit plan, right? So these are the questions we had to answer in conjunction with the internal audit team, in conjunction with discussion with the process owners, and so on and so forth, right? So setting up the right team structure and skill set within the internal audit team at STC was the other aspect that we focused on, because it was imperative that this needs to be a sustainable solution, because as processes change, new data sources get added, KPIs get kind of updated, the internal team had to be sustainable, right? So at no point in time, and this is where I kind of applaud Abdullah's vision as well as perseverance, right, to ensure that uh, we kind of created a structure that was sustainable and the team was adequately equipped with tools, techniques, proper documentation, proper handholding, knowledge transfer sessions, and even recruitment if need be, to set up this team and structure who would take the CCM journey forward, right? And I'm proud to see what Abdullah and team has been able to do today from the time that we kind of handed the solution over to them. And a lot of credit goes to the team that have taken complete ownership and accountability to use this, make this a success, because oftentimes organizations look at CCM or analytics as a project that a partner or a consultant will come and do. But unless there is ownership, unless there is plan for sustainability, this is never successful. So that's the continuous improvement and the upkeep. I'll move on to the next slide, which talks a little bit about our joint lessons learned in this journey. And maybe Abdullah, you can start and I will pitch in.
Yes, in this slide, we have uh, captured the challenges we faced and the lessons learned related to these challenges. First, change management. So implementing CCM is a marathon, not a sprint. The message here is we need to be patient. It's a program, not a one-off project. We need to secure also buy-in from all stakeholders. Actually, I was blessed with full support from the audit committee and executive management for this program, and also the buy-in from my team. So it was a success story. Actually, also the audit committee not only supported, they made it part of my KPIs to implement the CCM and to provide them on quarterly basis a successful implementation for one of the KPIs in the CCM. Second, getting the quality data is difficult, but always shortcuts will lead to garbage in, garbage out. Also, it is essential to develop a sustainable solution that reduce dependency and automate data sourcing with the collaboration of data owners and IT team. So now, whenever we need to get a data, we go to the system, we get a refresh by scripts developed by the IT team that help us and eliminated the dependency on them. The third is having the right operating model, as Emmett said. So what we did, we set up a separate department focusing on CCM, and we have acquired right talents and skilled team. So currently we have a 3 members program manager for CCM with 2 resources working on this project dedicatedly, to make sure also this team is self-sustainable, and they are now currently able to generate any ad hoc reports that are required. Fourth, false positives, which we talked about. And also I remember over the project period, the first few rounds of generating reports and exceptions, we got many exceptions, out of which only some were legitimate. I remember, for example, for HR and payroll, the first 6 rounds, we get the data was not accurate, was not complete. So only after the 7th round of getting the data, we were able to generate legitimate exceptions and fully understand the data. So we had to have several meetings with the data owners, with the IT, with the data warehouse to understand the structure of the system, the structure of the data. So what we did here, we worked on increasing the accuracy level by understanding the business process in data. Lastly, it is a continuous improvement process. As of now, there are more than 95 to 97% of exceptions, which are actual exceptions. The 3 to 5% need to be investigated further. However, when we started the project, this percentage was around 70%. The message here, it's a journey. We need to be patient. And in some organizations, after implementing CCM for first time, they will get many exceptions and they will become overwhelmed. They might also lose confidence as some of these exceptions do not make any sense. In the next slide, here we are talking about the benefits realized. So it's all about reducing turnaround and increasing efficiency. So reducing dependency on IT to get the data for other audit operations and not only CCM. Now with the full access to data and direct access to data, we are able to get any data required for any other audit operations, not only for CCM, instead of asking the data and waiting for it. Second, enabling early detection of potential frauds and errors. That helped a lot. Also, capturing trends, which might be a red flag, which need to be investigated. Also, reducing cost and potential loss associated with not addressing the control deficiencies. Expanding internal audit coverage with minimal running cost. And lastly, improving risk and control assurance in less time than traditional internal audit. The last slide here, I'm talking about the value realized. It's not an exhaustive list. We have listed 3 areas as an indicative benefits and values realized of these 3 areas. And we could not share some of the financials information due to confidentiality. Under the customer information assurance, we have the values realized. We capture data quality issues for customer information and CRM. Also proactive identifications of missing biometric information or bypassing the policy related to allowable subscription. The general ledger, which helped us a lot, as I mentioned, by material reduction in time and efforts for accounts, trends, and variance. Also with the full population coverage of GL analysis. And in procurement, periodic and early detection of any instances of conflict of interest. Multiple buying patterns for some items, for the same items identified, which impacted pricing. The last is the mismatches in quantity ordered, bill received, and billed. And I remember after completing the pilot, we did a presentation to procurement VP, and that is part of getting the buy-in and also getting the stakeholders familiarized and getting their support. So the message here is believe in your plan, in your ability, do it in phases as we did. Don't do the big bang. The support from your audit committee and executive management is a key success factor to the success of a CCM implementation. With that, I conclude the presentation.
So thank you, Abdullah. I think we'll open it now for Q&A, and maybe I'll pick up the questions and start kind of moderating. So Abdullah, the first question would be, and it's coming from head of an internal audit, saying that we would like to make a beginning, but we do not know where to begin, right? And there is obviously a lot of pressure on return on investment versus the program approach that you took. So what would be your advice to the heads of internal audit listening to you today in the region, that if they are convinced to take this journey forward, what, how do they manage the internal and external expectations? Uh, what do they do in order to ensure that this is a success and the program kind of sees the light at the end of the tunnel?
Yes, I would answer that with the 3 steps to be done. First is to select an area, do it in phases, do a pilot. So select could be an area with availability, with a clear availability on data, and the process is matured with a clear policy. Second, secure an infrastructure, and if you don't have the required budget, you could get the help of IT to host the infrastructure for CCM in the beginning till you get the buy-in from executive management or audit committee to have your own dedicated infrastructure. Third, to have a member of your team act as a project manager, temporary, in addition to his roles and responsibilities. Because you need to have this team member, because he will be playing a key role to the success of this pilot implementation. And once this pilot implementation is successful, then you can go and keep adding other areas. In the beginning, you will be spending a huge time in implementing the infrastructure and also understanding the data. But once you add the first area, the other areas will be added in more efficient and effective way.
Well, thank you, Abdullah. And that's a great answer. And just to kind of chime in there, obviously start small, show value. But I think also managing expectations is key, because oftentimes we kind of engage in conversations where there is a discussion on, okay, if something takes 50 man days, will it start taking 30 man days? I mean, I would sincerely request that that's not the approach we should look at when we are starting the program, right? Because setting it up, getting it right takes time and investment, right? So the expectation that somehow the first time itself will bring down my mandates to a certain number is not the appropriate expectation to set. However, as Abdullah mentioned, as you continue the journey, the upsides are tremendous, right? Something that took hours or days gets done in a click of a button. But in order to get there, perseverance is important and continuous expectation management is important. And ownership is important along the way as well, because, the internal audit team, the process owners, they know the organization best, right? And as they work with the data, they get to know new things that was not visible to them before. So working with it along the way is very, very important. Setting the right expectation is important. And like very rightly mentioned by Abdullah, it's a marathon and not a sprint. So the commitment has to be there for the long term. It cannot be a half-hearted attempt. Uh, so one other question, Abdullah, I would pick up, which is around the question of whether I should drive this internally, whether I should seek a partner. What are the pros and cons? What would be your advice?
Yes, I would recommend to have a consultant, because having the right consultant working with you side by side is a key success factor. However, from day one, you should have an individual from your team working with this consultant to transfer the knowledge. And also you need someone with the background of IT, because learning the scripting, because you need he will be, or this individual will be working on extracting the data, analyzing it, and then publishing it in the right dashboard. So you need this individual with a background of programming skills, understanding the data structure, and also understanding the business. Because as I said, he will be, or they will be faced with huge false positives, which can be cleared with sitting and discussing and understanding with the business owners. So having a consultant at the beginning is a key. I would say for the first maybe 1 to 2 years, and then you can form your own team as we reached today in STC.
And thank you, Abdullah. And I think one of the key reasons for our successful journey also has been the ownership that was there from STC from day one, right? So it was not, we were not working in a silo as a partner, and it was not that the team was not involved. So we formed a joint working group. We formed a team of process champions. We had a program manager and a project director from STC side, and the journey continued along with them, right? So everything was seamless. We were working as a one team. One of the things I have personally seen is that oftentimes, while some of the skills around analytics or technology that may exist in the internal audit teams of some organizations, but the day-to-day activities take a precedence. And sometimes if you don't get support or external help, this is always put in the back burner and it never gets done. And like Abdullah talked about, this needs persistence, this needs focus, and this needs somebody who is not dragged into your day-to-day operational audit plan. So if you're able to dedicate that bandwidth for a team to drive this, there is no harm in trying it internally. However, I mean, most organizations tend to struggle balancing their day-to-day plan and operational work with something like this, which is far more strategic and has to have a longer term view. So I think with that, I think we have covered, let me see if there are any more questions. I think we have covered most of the key questions. Abdullah, any last advice from your side to anybody attending who is still kind of in two minds as to whether, to go for it, not to go for it? Any last comments, thoughts from you as a closing comment?
Well, I will close with the quote in the last slide, which is, if you do nothing, nothing will be done. So talking about CCM and doing nothing will take you nowhere. So act today. If you want to move, take your audit function to the next gen, start using the CCM, will help you a lot, will generate huge value to the department, to the business, and will give you more time to focus on strategic and seek help with the right consultant. And thank you.
Thank you, Abdullah. Thank you so much. Thanks to the CAE conference team for giving us this opportunity. With that, we will close our session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, gentlemen. This case study is a model for the internal auditors to follow in the telecommunications sector. Wish you all the best with your future endeavors. And I believe in what Abdullah said, that believe in your plan and then start executing it. That was a wonderful thing to say. We always have to believe in what we do. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we will have a short break for 10 minutes. I invite you to visit the sponsors and exhibitors booths to learn about what they are doing. Wish you all the best and see you after 10 minutes. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. As mentioned by the chairman of the board at the beginning of the day, that we have speakers and attendees from 17 countries attending virtually. And the translator, Talib Tariq, is currently based in Turkey and is providing his services from there. This is the benefit of the new norm. Now, the next session is sponsored by Creston, which is a platinum sponsor. During this session, Doron Rosenblum, who is the managing partner at Creston Group in Israel, and Sudhir Kumar, who is the senior partner and head of corporate communications at Creston Minon in United Arab Emirates. They will be in conversation about internal auditing as the fortress was protecting the company. And before we begin, a gentle reminder that translation is provided, and please place your questions before you begin. Thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Doron and Sudhir.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Your Excellency Abdullah bin Tukel Mari, Minister of Economy and Cabinet Member, Your Excellency Dr. Talal Abu Ghazala, CEO and founder of Talal Abu Ghazala Global, Your Excellency Abdul Qadir Obed Ali, Chairman of the UAE IAA Board, Sami Al Yusuf, General Manager of the UAE IAA, and Sudhir Kumar, my dear colleague and co-presenter from Creston Menon. Dear participants, good afternoon. I'm honored to participate. I would like to congratulate the UAE IAA team for this outstanding conference. Thank you for inviting us to participate. My presentation today and my conversation with Sudhir later on will address the evolving role of the internal auditor from just an assurance provider to a trusted advisor, and some of the current issues that I believe and recommend that we can contribute to the companies we serve. Following my presentation, Sudhir Kumar and I will engage in a conversation and hopefully answer some of your questions. And please visit our booth during the recess. I would like to start with an invitation to Israel. And I hope to see you soon and physically. Okay, I'll stop here. This was a short introduction and invitation for each one of you. In the 21st century, the internal audit function took an evolving role in the strategic management and decision-making. If you look at the global surveys, you can see that we're expected to play an important role in the overall risk management. It's not only just the assurance work that we're expected to conduct. So in this presentation, I will discuss the strategic value of the internal audit to the business itself. A few words about myself. I'm also the managing partner of Creston Israel Group, but I'm vice president of the Institute of Internal Auditors in Israel and a former IAA Global Board member and a current committee member of the Global Institute of Internal Audit in the US, and of course a frequent lecturer in universities and other organizations. Looking at the evolving strategic role of an internal auditor from the stakeholders' point of view, you can see on the left that we started as assurance provider and will continue to do that, delivering objective assurance on the effectiveness of the organization's internal control. Following that, we're also problem solvers in some of the cases. We analyze issues and we bring answers to the management and our recommendations, of course. We are then expected to bring insight, or as I call it here, insight generators. We need to have more proactive role in suggesting meaningful improvements. And now, currently, most of our clients look at us as trusted advisors. They're looking more value-added service and not only the assurance that we are providing and historically started as assurance provider. So the assurance providing role is, of course, our traditional role. But looking at the point of view of the stakeholders, they expect more. One of the issues that are looking at is the 8 foundational attributes, which you see on the next screen. We have to be proficient with technology. We need to understand cost effectiveness, culture. We need to understand stakeholders, management, of course, quality and innovation, talent management, business alignment, and of course, the risk focus. Going back to this slide, stakeholders find that that more than twice the level, we are valued twice the level than just as assurance providers if we bring that extra assistance. Stakeholders believe that the benefits of these internal audit departments far exceed their costs by nearly 40% over just assurance providers. So this is a very big change that we need to take into consideration. Now, what are the qualities of good internal auditors and trusted advisors? This is very important for each one of us. We need to have good leadership skills. We don't get self-conscious, meaning that we need to be objective. We're persistent, so it means that we are committed to make the required changes. We need to follow up on our recommendation and see that the changes are made. We have to be good with technology. And we heard the previous presentations which were on it. So we need to take that into consideration. We have to be good or even very good at building relationships. And we always have to continue learning. And this is what we are doing when we participate in conferences like this one. We need to understand data. And today we're talking about big data. We have to be creative. This is very important. When I look for employees and associates, this is one of the qualities that I'm looking for. We have to be diplomatic. And we need to follow our gut feeling. And hopefully our gut feeling is correct, okay? So if you see that you're making too many mistakes, don't follow your gut feeling. But if you see that it's working, please carry on. This is a very important slide. Now, what are the implications to the business? It seems that the expectations are changing. Now, for internal auditors to meet or exceed the raised expectations, there are 3 important things that need to happen. The first one, that we need to become more deeply involved in the business, okay? We need to understand the business and we need to bring added value to the business itself, okay? It's not only the controls or the compliance, they're looking for added value. Second, internal auditors need to leverage technology more and more. It's not what we did 20 years ago or 30 years ago. We need to harness technology for our use. We have to be there. Third, internal auditors need to review the activity through the lens of business value. I think I mentioned it in the previous slides also. This is very, very important, and I can't emphasize it even more. This is insights from deep analysis that we see from expectations from all our stakeholders. I would like to remind the standards that we work, the IPPF, and including in the IPPF, we have the internal audit mission, which states that we need to enhance and protect organizational value. We can't forget that while we are doing our assurance work and providing our services. And I will get to that at the end also. So this means that we need to know where we are today, what value we are delivering right now, and we need to be looking out and see where we could be or should be tomorrow. What value we need to build now for tomorrow. And I'm not talking about 2 to 5 years. I'm really speaking about the next day, about tomorrow. If you look at the changes, you see on screen 30 years apart, researches by IAE Global. In the 1990s, we were expected to have knowledge, which is reasonable, analytical skills, application skills, creative skills, decision-making skill, communication skills, social skills, self-analysis skills, and attitudes. What happened 30 years later on? Analytical and critical thinking is still there. You can see that even though 30 years apart, it's still there. Communication skills, still important, we have it. IT general skills, we didn't have it 30 years ago, okay? So this is, you can see the research. How about risk management? We didn't have it 30 years ago. These are the recent expectations. And I think one of them, which is very important again, is the business acumen. We didn't have it 30 years ago. We only did, or mainly did, assurance work and compliance work. And now we are expected to understand the business. So this is a major change, and you can see it on screen. This is a question that I ask my fellow chief audit executives, and if I were in front of you physically, I would ask you to raise your hand and tell me what type of internal auditor are you? Or if I may ask it differently, are you having lunch on your own, or are you swimming in the calm pool, or maybe swimming with the sharks in the wild ocean? Okay? Are you standing in the sideline, or again, swimming in the calm pool? And I can tell you that asking my friends, I can still, or visiting my friends, I can see them still eating lunch on their own most of the time. So this is quite sad at this stage. So where can we contribute? I collected a few topics that I think that we can contribute. The list can be larger, of course. I chose these 5 topics to elaborate on. The first one is cybersecurity, cyber threats. We have many cyber threats. This is a partial list: social engineering, remote access tools, compromised computers, watering holes, denial of service, hacktivism. I can tell you that last week, an insurance company in Israel, a small one, was hacked, and its entire database of information was downloaded and uploaded to the internet, and it was merely stolen. So this is a big threat, and I don't know what will happen with this company, as it's of course regulated, but it's quite a disaster for that company. And if you look at the history of data breaches, I brought a few examples. The largest insider attack was with the Boeing company, 2 billion, and persisted for 30 years. This is amazing. Yahoo holds the top record for the largest data breach of 3 billion compromised accounts. If you look at the 6 months of the first 6 months of 2019 of last year, 4.1 billion records were breached, and this is only growing and growing. And every 39 seconds, This is how often a cyber attack occurs. And 90% of the malware comes from emails. And I will elaborate about that in a few minutes. If you look at the total cost of data breaches, we're talking about millions. Each data breach. Healthcare was the biggest, highest data breach, 6.45 millions. Hackers don't mind if it's a hospital. Okay, so we need to take that into consideration. Every record in a data breach worth $150. We need to take that into consideration too. 71% were financially motivated, and the life cycle is almost a year in the system. Okay, we need to know that. Some of you maybe got one of these emails from, it looks like an Amazon email asking you to press the link, but it's not from Amazon. Maybe from seemingly Microsoft. Again, this wasn't from Microsoft. These are phishing trials that are sent to all of us, and we're getting that every day. This is a nice guy from Johannesburg asking me for money. Okay, he wants to send me money and asking for my information. Again, the system has to intercept those emails. Ransomware damages are over $5 billion in each year and growing. We need to take that into consideration. So that's the first topic that I think that we can bring a lot of consulting work and of course assurance work in the cyber arena. The second topic that I wanted to address is the culture or auditing culture. First, I would like to address what is culture. When we speak about culture, we usually say it's how people behave. If we choose people or two people, how they behave, that's culture. When we speak about corporate culture, it's the way employees behave, it's how the management behaves, and we expect some kind of framework of acceptable behavior, which is shaped by the entity, approved by the board, and communicated to the employees. Now, this communication can take different forms. It can be an email to the employees or any other way. But it's usually based on integrity, fairness, professionalism, and trust. And to be successful, for example, it's critical that, that an entity will be transparent as possible to the employees, for example. Okay, but that's one example. Some entities have a code of conduct and that interprets or shows some diagrams or explanation or examples of what will be considered as a violation of behavior standards. Others don't and just react, and I'll show you soon. One example is using social media activity and looking into that. I found a few places that social media was used by employees in a wrong way and breached the code of conduct that the entity had. So this was part of my auditing culture. And I think this is something that we need to take into consideration. In the last couple of years, we had different issues about diversity, Me Too, Black Lives Matter. You all remember Dieselgate, but it can also be part of management culture. I can be a manager with aggression, to be aggressive to my employees. I could be outcome oriented, maybe people oriented, team oriented. So this is different culture issues that we need to take into consideration. Now, you probably heard about Peter Drucker. He said a few years back, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Some say that he said culture eats everything for breakfast. So this means that we need to capture these issues. Now, how do you conduct business, these audit? We usually start with a standard gap analysis. Okay, we look at what there's available and what isn't. We capture evidence and we link it to cultural issues. We need to take into consideration that these are sensitive issues being discussed. In global entities, we usually have different cultures, and we need to take that into consideration while auditing. And we might need multicultural teams to conduct this kind of audit. So this is a very important. Now, to summarize this part, I would like to look at this maturity model about culture. As you can see, we don't want to be at the chaos part, which is the uncontrolled entity. But we see more and more entities that are in the stage 2, in their reactive stage, meaning they are fighting fires. They are aware of aspects in culture that may help or hinder. The culture misaligned to goals, but they react to specific fires that they have in the organization. The next stage is an organization which is proactive, is focused and measuring. Culture is viewed as an asset to be managed, and this is a major change. Our dream, of course, is to be optimized, aligned, and adding value. Okay? So as you can see, this is the maturity model, and this should be a part of what we would like to expect when we are auditing this topic. Another idea that I would like to raise is the third-party risks. I found out that very few internal auditors are conducting specific risks audits related to third-party risks. An example that I found last year, that hackers tried to steal Airbus secrets using and connecting through contractors and suppliers' systems. They didn't try and connect directly to Airbus systems, but they used the contractor systems, and they found out that they were not monitored as well as the Airbus system itself. So what is the first step in this case? So I usually suggest that first we need to get visibility who the company is doing business with. It's a simple question, but sometimes or usually the companies are not mapping that. They don't have that visibility. So let's start in getting that visibility. The next stage, of course, will be manage the risk associated with these third parties that we've identified, concentrating on their efforts on those that pose the highest risk. So that's part of the system of how to do it. But we need to start with a framework and a defined process. We need a strong governance in place to define the next steps once the risk is identified. We need to have guidance. It's not only remediating. We need to decide if the risk is accepted. How do we manage it? Who owns the risk? There has to be a clear ownership of third-party risks. When we say third-party, we know everybody's looking around. Who owns the risk? Somebody has to own it. And again, we need to have people in the organization with a risk management background to understand and take care of this issue. How about the digital era? It seems that the world has moved from analog to digital quite long ago. Did risk management make the transition? Did all of us do that transition? I feel that we need to leverage more risk management to enable business transformation and sustained growth. We need to make the change in the risk management. We need to adapt to risk environment and risk profile that is changing faster and more intensively than ever. We used to conduct risk assessment every 3 years, 4 years. Now, at least once a year. I'm not even talking about online risk management, but at least once a year. That's expected from all of us now. We need to deliver risk management effectively and efficiently and manage through and recover from disruption. And now we have COVID-19, and we're all waiting for the post-COVID-19 to see how the world is recovering from this huge disruption that impacted all of us. When I look at the risk management matrix, I see huge demographic change. We all see geopolitical turbulence, disruptive technologies, exploding data volumes, shifting regulatory requirements. The regulators are working all the time and making changes. We need to follow that. Robotic automation. We have an interest presentation afterwards about robotics. Machine learning, artificial intelligence, supercomputing. Does a risk management take all of this into consideration? The world is heating up. Is that in our risk management platforms? Is it in our audit plans? We need to look into that also. So there are major global trends and there are changing client demand for more digital delivery of our products, of our reports, of our risk management. They expect lean audits. They expect to see the change from our part. Firms are forced to adapt new business and operating models. Working from home during the COVID-19, having enough laptops. We have some, I encountered some companies all over the world, they didn't have enough laptops to work from home. Social media makes it more difficult to manage company reputation. Damaging news travels far and fast, instantly. So these mega trends mean risk management needs a new approach, and our yesterday challenges are less relevant today. And we need to adapt a digital risk management that addresses the risk associated with the digital transformation across the business and the vast changes that we have as we speak. How about privacy? I have on screen a few examples. You probably know the one on the top right, which is the EU GDPR. How about the New York State Shield Act? If you have clients in New York State, you have to be aware of this specific act around privacy. California, for example, has its own Privacy Rights Act. We need to be aware in this global world, okay? Because when I conduct privacy audits, I look into what kind of laws, regulations are relevant in that specific country, in that specific state. And if you look at this UN map, this is the data protection privacy legislation worldwide map. Seemingly, the map is almost green or dark green, which means that there is legislation in place. So everywhere we go, we'll see some kind of legislation that we need to take into consideration. The light green, on the other hand, is draft legislation, and we have areas in red with no legislation at all, and we need to be aware of that. So the GDPR, I guess most of you found that out, and it was approved in 2016, and there was a 2-year transition period, and there's an increase in sanctions, and it's global. Because if, for example, I have a company based in Israel which serves European clients, this is relevant for the GDPR is relevant to them. This is a global law, regulation. So we need to look at the personal data. What kind of logical personal data registers are in place? What policies are needed? What are the responsibilities? Do we need some kind of specific training for that? How do we detect breaches, problems? How do we do that? We need to we need to have changes for that. We need to have user management. We need to change our contracts. We need to amend them. So, and very important, what is our policy on data retention and erasure? So, like every audit, I would look at it this way. We need to identify privacy and regulatory requirements of the organization. We need to review the data, classify it. We need to identify existing privacy processes and practices. We need to define privacy risks. We need to define privacy controls, and then key risk indicators. Who are the key contributors for that? We have the legal department. We might have a privacy team, the audit team, of course, information security, compliance, marketing, human resources. This is the group that we look at. So these are examples of key risk indicators. You may look, you will receive this presentation and you can see these examples. But these are the processes that I should look when I look at these topics. We need to look at business processes, product and service information, information flows, outsourced services, and access information. I would like now to tie the knot and go back to the internal audit mission. As I mentioned before, it requires us to enhance and protect organizational value. And we as internal auditors need to raise the issues discussed, and raising these issues and bringing the value as internal auditors and trusted advisors, we contribute and protect the organization. You may send us questions using the Q&A option now. And the next stage is Sudhir Kumar and I will engage in a conversation and accept your questions and hopefully help you and answer those questions. So thank you very, very much. And again, I'm honored to participate.
Your Excellency Abdullah Bintu Kalmari, UAE Minister for Economy, Your Excellency Abdul Qadir Ubaid Ali, Chairman of the UAE Internal Audit Association Board, Your Excellency Dr. Talal Abu Ghazaleh, CEO and founder of Talal Abu Ghazaleh Global, Samia Al Yusuf, General Manager, UAE Internal Audit Association, Doron Rosenblum, and all the speakers, dear delegates, good afternoon to you all. I'm delighted and honored to be here this afternoon for the 9th Chief Audit Executive Conference. Thanks to the UAE Internal Audit Association for inviting us here, and congratulations to the UAE Internal Audit Association, the entire team, His Excellency Abdul Qadir, Samia Al Yusuf, Yasmin, and all of you for such a great event. Permit me to borrow the words of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President and Prime Minister of the UAE and the ruler of Dubai. His Highness says, the future belongs to those who can imagine it, design it, and execute it. It isn't something you await, but rather create. We are all here today for connecting opportunities, for getting connected, for a new future, for a new tomorrow. That's where we are. Creston Menon is an auditing, accounting, business consulting, and management consulting firm based in the UAE for the last 27 years with 9 offices and 300 plus people. Creston Menon represents Creston International, headquartered in the UK. Now I start straight the conversation. Doron, excellent presentation. I was going through and listening each and every point, very relevant, very current. And let me start with the theme of the conversation, connecting opportunities. Now, according to you, how Israel and UAE can connect each other in the current scenario? How Israeli firms and UAE firms connect each other? How, say, for example, how Creston IL from Israel connect with Creston Menon in the UAE? Why I'm asking this question, this is very important currently, because just a couple of days back, Dubai hosted one of the largest business meets, and not virtual summit, it is a physical in-personal meet, which was titled UAE Israel Future Digital Economy Summit. And 300 Israeli businessmen were flown in by the government, and they were all, the entire hospitality done by the government of UAE, and the discussions were done. A lot of deliberations were done on various topics. Her Excellency Reem Ibrahim Al Hashmi, the UAE Minister for State and the Director General of Expo 2020, inaugurated the summit, and Her Excellency was talking about the humongous opportunities and the connectivity going to start between UAE and Israel. We also had His Excellency Sultan Omar bin Olama, the UAE Minister of State for Artificial Intelligence, Digital Economy, and the remote work applications, talking on the collaborations that are going to happen in artificial intelligence space and the digital economy space. Her Excellency Mariam Al-Muhairi talked on the collaborations which happen on the food and water sector. He's the Minister for Food and Water Security, talked about the collaborations happening there. We had major government leaders talking, His Excellency Sultan bin Sulayem, talking on Chairman of DP World, talking on the ports, His Excellency Muhammad Al-Labar, the Chairman of IMAR, talking on properties, His Excellency Arif Al-Ameri, the CEO of Dubai International Financial, talking about Dubai International Financial Center collaboration and the FinTech collaboration. We had His Excellency Dr. Tariq bin Hindi, the CEO of Abu Dhabi Investment Office, which is setting up an office in Israel shortly, talking about those collaborations, and many people talking on this new found connectivity and opportunities. So I want to know, what's your take for the future?
Thank you, Sudhir. Well, my belief is that the UAE is probably the best global example of a connecting opportunities platform. I haven't seen anything like it. Looking at the brochures of Preston Menon, which I downloaded myself, I saw how many different nationals are employed in your office. I looked at the diversity and inclusion in your firm. This is something that I haven't seen in any other place globally. And I have clients in Europe, I have clients in the US. I haven't seen anything like it. Other opportunities that I already saw His Excellency Abdul Qadir Obed Ali, the chairman of the UAE IAA, already participated in a conference that I organized in Israel. It was a virtual conference, of course, I'm afraid, but we have already connected. I believe that the different point views is very essential for internal audit engagement. So when we are, and I know that we are in a global world. I see that in my own practice. I have clients all over. I was just approached by a new client. He wants me to conduct internal audits in 15 countries all over the world, from Brazil, Hungary, London, and other places and locations, and I have to get organized. The only way to do it is by connecting and using the opportunities that we have and the friendships that we have. And as you said, Sudhir, and you know that we started to collaborate very fast, and I think we're speaking more than once a week, looking at different engagements and opportunities to join forces and do business. And I think that this will continue and strengthen the relations between the countries. And we'll see more of that coming.
For 2021, there are a lot of predictions. There's a lot of positivity happening. In fact, a couple of days back during the same conference, His Excellency Kalfan Belhoul, the CEO of Dubai Future Foundation, was very positive about 2021. And there are a lot of positivities happening. I wanted to know what are the three main risks you see for 2021?
Okay, relating to the main risks, I would refer everyone to the material, the publication that the ECIIA prepared for 2021, and the ECIIA prepared this information for the past few years. The top risks, if you look at their publication, you see that the cybersecurity and data security is the top risks. All over the world, chief audit executives were asked to mark their own risks, what the risks that they see. So 79% that said that this was the top risk. And as I told you, I gave you an example about the small insurance company just last week. And this is a regulated entity, and it has a system in place. And for some reason, nobody saw the amount of information that was downloaded or uploaded to a different place, and with very, very important information, client information that was breached. The second risk that Chief Audit Executive mentioned was regulatory changes and compliance issues. I'm not sure if this was affected by the COVID-19, but we see more regulatory changes and more compliance needs. We know that in different companies, employees, or at least some of them, are working from home, and we need to take that into consideration. And that was the second risk. The third one was the digitalization, the new technology, AI, robotics, And again, this is a topic that will be mentioned in this conference too. We can't avoid it. And I don't know. Can we ask the participant what is the fourth risk? What you can anyone guess what that might be? You can even use the chat or Q&A to send us your ideas. So I'll give you the answer. It's the financial, capital, and liquidity risks. And I'm sure that this, of course, will be impacted by the COVID-19. And I'm sure that Sudhir probably can comment on that also. I'm sure that the financial and capital markets are also impacted in your view.
Yes, definitely. There is a lot of concern in here also, this market also. In fact, all our speakers before also talked about it. There is a lot of strict measures being adopted now. At the same time, I would also want to ask you on another topic. What are the topics or what are the subjects you think are a collaboration of a firm in Israel or UAE, or firms collaborating with the countries collaborating with UAE can start working for? What do you think? What are the new opportunities? We heard about innovation in internal audit. We heard about on the digital economy space. Your take.
Okay. There are a few topics that I would suggest for joint team engagement. The first topic that I'm not sure if it's regulated in the UAE is quality assurance review. When I speak about quality assurance review, I mean the internal audit. We sometimes call it quality QAR or internal audit quality assurance reviews. This I would suggest a joint team. It's always nice to see different views from different parts of the world. I can tell you that the Israeli Institute of Internal Auditor 2 weeks ago conducted a quality assurance review training, and the trainer was from the US, and it was very interesting to see his different views of how to conduct those quality assurance, which in some instances is different when I conduct those. So with the joint team with Creston Menon, I think we can bring, for example, we can bring more insight. Other topics, as I mentioned before, culture audits. When you have a team from different countries, different cultures, it's very interesting to see the product. Privacy audits, once again, a joint team effort is very interesting. It's very interesting for the team itself. We learn from each other. And I can tell you that the COVID-19 opened my eyes in different ways. I hired employees because I have clients in the US that are based in the US, and my team used to fly in for a few days each time to conduct audits. I had to hire a team in the US, one in Texas, one in New York, one in California, to assist us with internal audit engagements that we couldn't do remotely. Okay, so and this joint effort with a team online from Israel and a team running around the US or flying around was an interesting and very enlightening project. The last topic that I would suggest is, of course, the cyber audit engagements. In this issue, different point of views can be very beneficial. It's a top priority issue, the cyber. As you can see, this is not going anywhere. We need to be alert all the time. We need to see that our systems are intact. And this could be a huge contribution from the internal audit and risk management arena.
And from your experience, what do you see is the greatest value a major corporate gets by getting into an internal audit process? There are many people said, but I wanted to know your take on that.
Okay. This is an interesting question. From my perspective, from over 25 years of internal audit work, I think that the biggest joy that I see in my work that we conduct the internal audit report. We bring it to the audit committee. We bring it to the board, and we see our recommendations implemented quickly. It's not like a report that a different advisor, an engineer brings to the company, to the management. In most countries, especially when it's regulated, they have to implement the recommendations that they accepted. And you can see, usually even before a year passes, you can see your work implemented. And that's amazing. You don't see that with other advisors because we have a special position. I have a few examples that clients prefer to have the audit report on a topic that it's not a classic internal audit report. One of them was included an engineering topic, but because my team has a few engineers, they preferred that I do the work because they knew that this will be implemented in zero time, because it was an internal audit report and it was a regulated company. It was a government entity owned, and they had to comply with that. So that's my biggest joy. I see it very quickly implemented. You can see the change.
Okay, I am taking up a question, which is a very interesting question. Probably it's from a very young internal auditor who is planning to have his career as an internal auditor, asking you, with your 25 years plus experience in this space, in the internal audit space, how you suggest a successive career in internal audit and how you stay relevant.
Can you ask the question again? It was
yeah. The question, I believe, is from a very young internal auditor, and he wants to know that, he or she wants to know that how, with your 25 years plus experience in the internal audit space, how you advise that as a very successful career, how you stay relevant.
Okay. I think that the answer to that is study. You have to study and learn all the time. Internal audit is very different from other occupations because we need to know a lot of topics. We need to have some kind of basis in accounting. We need to have a basis in auditing. We need to have common sense, and you're usually born with that. You can't learn that. We need to have some engineering knowledge, and we need to be business-wise. I think that's the best recommendation. We need to understand the business. That is very important.
I will add one more. You regularly teach students, and that academia thing increases your knowledge and definitely keep you much more updated.
Mr. Sudair, just a reminder that your time is over. So this is the last question. Let Mr. Doron respond to it, and that's it, okay? Thank you.
Okay, I think the academics is very important. In some countries, you can study internal audit in universities as part of the business management or accounting studies, which is very important to bring more knowledge and specific internal audit knowledge. And of course, the IIA and the local institute, for example, the UAE IAA has amazing training. I have friends that I know that are training in the UAE IAA, and that's the best way to learn and have experience.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And
Thank you, Doron Rosenblum and Sudhir Kumar. It was a very informative session. We really appreciate what you have done. And Doron, the way you impress what is expected from an internal auditor pre and post COVID-19 is highly appreciated. And I was shocked to hear the history of data breaches and the cost. The world has moved from analog to digital. Risk management must do the same. That is very, very impressive. And the message here is very good. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, now is the time for the concurrent sessions. There will be 2 tracks to choose from. The first track will be in English and the translation into Arabic will be provided. The speaker is Apurva Yatendra, who is the head of Telecom and Automation Vertical at ANB. He will be talking about robotics, analytics, and visualization, integrated platforms for new line of defense. The second track will be in Arabic, and the speaker is Dr. Mervet Hussein Al-Sayed, who is a member of the Examiners Committee at Ain Shams University in Egypt. Her topic is about future challenges in the internal audit profession in light of modern technological changes. Kindly choose your track and attend it. I hope you enjoy your choice. Once the sessions are over, then it will be time for lunch and prayers. Looking forward to welcoming you back at 2 p.m. Enjoy your break. On to the general polling survey questions as we aspire to serve you in a better way. Kindly note also that this session has translation facility. Our last session for today will be presented by Ms. Nancy Haig. We highly appreciate her support as she accepted to be a keynote speaker at the conference in spite of the time difference between UAE and US. Nancy is the chairperson of the IAA North American Board for 2021. She will be presenting about building a lifetime of career success in internal auditing. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Ms. Nancy Haig.
Greetings and salutations. Assalamu alaikum. It is an honor to... Greetings and salutations. Assalamu alaikum. It is an honor to be here with you today, albeit virtually. Here we go. And I'm actually speaking to you today from Florida in the Gulf of Mexico in the United States of America, where, as it was said, it's 6 a.m. So again, I'm glad to be here. Before I begin our formal discussion, I would like to take this opportunity, if I may, to acknowledge just a few of the many significant accomplishments of the IIA, UAE, and its members. First, I'd like to highlight that in March 2014, the UAE hosted the IIA's Global Council, now called the Global Assembly in Dubai. There are 189 people in attendance, including participants from 75 IIA global affiliates. And then there was the International Conference held in Dubai in May 2018, which was attended by over 3,000 individuals from 108 countries and which included 70 participants from 71 global affiliates. Also, the UAE has the highest level of IIA certifications in all of the Middle East. And as of October 2020, there were approximately 1,371 CIAs, or Certified Internal Auditors, awarded by the IIA UAE, 13 QIALs, or Qualification in Internal Audit Leadership, awarded by the IIA UAE, and a total of approximately 1,931 certifications awarded by the IIA UAE overall, including, besides the CIA and QIAL, the CCSA, CFSA, CRMA, and IAP. So congratulations, Mabruk, to the IIA UAE, and all the best for continued success. Now on to today's presentation, Building a Lifetime of Career Success in Internal Auditing. And what we will be discussing. We will discuss the characteristics or qualifications that have proven to be important over time for those enjoying or choosing a career in the exciting and rewarding profession of internal auditing. Also, building relationships throughout a career is essential, and it starts by making connections, the theme of your conference, which should not only lead to opportunities for you, but for others as well, a true secret to success. We will now discuss how to stay current and cut through all the noise on web and social media, which is constantly building, in order to focus on what is important to you and your organization. And finally, we will talk about resiliency in a way that perhaps you have not heard before, because no matter how good you are, no matter how up to date you are, there will be times when you need to stay strong and push through to achieve your goals. A couple of points to level set our discussion. First, the global pandemic. I am truly sorry for the impacts that the pandemic has had on all of us, has had on you, your family, and friends, and I do not in any way mean to minimize its importance. However, from a professional perspective, I hope to show you today how the right qualifications and perspective can take you through even such a significant period. There will always be change. There will always be crises, some more than significant than others. However, if we are always evolving and moving into the future, we will succeed. Another and second important point is that internal auditing is a profession. What does that mean, and why is this important to our discussion today? The term profession, according to one definition from the Australian government's website, says it's primarily an indicator of trust and expertise. A profession is also said to be a group of individuals who adhere to ethical standards and possess standardized knowledge and skills founded on a high level of training and education. I believe that we can all agree that these definitions pertain to internal auditing. And just like the profession of, say, medicine or being a chef, the tools, the methods constantly change. However, the very essence of what is to be accomplished remains constant over time. The medical profession will focus on healing, and the chef will focus on creating food to be enjoyed. And likewise, the internal audit professional will independently and objectively ensure that the organization's governance processes are intact and that controls related to risks are assessed to ensure their efficiency and effectiveness. I can assure you that this has remained constant, at least in the 40+ years that I have been in the profession. So if the basic tenets of our profession do not change, what characteristics do we need as CAEs to ensure that we are aware of and that we can meet all of the challenges we must face, both from external forces like a pandemic and those specific to our organizations? Also, how can we ensure that we are able to assess all of the available tools and techniques that may make our internal audit functions the most effective and efficient, enabling each of us to truly add value to our organizations, especially when we are called on to do more with less. Like many of you, I have had the privilege, and I say that with all sincerity, of enjoying a career in the profession of internal auditing for a long time. There are things I learned along the way that I hope will be helpful to you as well. Some time ago, I did a global survey of Chief Audit Executives, or CAEs, through LinkedIn in preparation for an IIA presentation that I prepared entitled, "So You Want to Be a CAE." I looked at the CAEs' profiles and their certifications and level of education, and I also sent them follow-up messages asking what they thought was important to their success in their role as a CAE. Probably, not surprisingly, many of the CAEs had advanced degrees and had earned the CIA, and in many cases, the CAEs had been awarded multiple certifications, again, going back to our definition of profession, which highlights the level of education and skills required. Some of the many characteristics that were identified as important to career success included integrity, intellectual curiosity, creativity, critical thinking, and the ability to analyze and synthesize information and effectively communicate with all levels in the organization, both orally and in writing. CAEs also mentioned the importance of thoroughly understanding their industry and their business and being able to bring unpopular information to other members of the C-suite. CAEs said that they must also understand the risks to their organization's achievement of strategic objectives, the organization's risk appetite, and risk tolerance. What was interesting from my perspective was the similarity of responses from the diverse group of CAEs. So, what are we missing? What was missing from this list of survey feedback? Perhaps what's missing is even more important to note than the characteristics, qualifications, and skills of successful CAEs. Note that there were no specific risks mentioned, no specific subject areas, nor specific risk frameworks, tools, or technologies. And why is that? Because all of these things will continuously change over time, which is why it is so important to be intellectually curious and a continuous learner, and why key characteristics such as integrity and creativity will always be important. Now let's move on to building relationships. First, let's talk about relationships with management and other C-suite colleagues within our organizations. This can be somewhat tricky if you think about it. However, it can be done. First and foremost, we are expected above all to be independent and objective at all times. This has always been a tenet of our profession, and this actually serves us well. However, this does not mean that we can't have professional relationships within our organization with staff, managements, and colleagues in the C-suite. Sometimes it even starts during the interview process. I have a little story to share with you. I remember doing a round of interviews at an organization where I was subsequently hired. I was in the office of the CFO having a conversation when a gray-haired man walked in without knocking and started looking through some papers piled on the CFO's desk. He gave me a sideways glance and left without saying a word. The CFO continued our conversation without addressing the incident and without missing a beat. I later found out, because I was the first CAE being hired to create, implement, and direct an internal audit function for the company, that the CFO, who had been with the organization since its start, had incorrectly assumed and was concerned that I was being hired to focus solely on her and her area and on financial controls. While some of you may think that there may have been a concern about fraud, this was not the case. However, I can say that financial processes were inefficient and outdated, hence the piles of papers on her desk that I mentioned. And the gray-haired man that was going through piles of papers, he was the head of general counsel, her personal friend, and had also been with the organization since the beginning. And he also wanted a look at who was being hired in the role. I also later learned that they both decided after my interview that I was okay. They realized through my conversation that I would be there to help the entire organization by focusing on all kinds of risks, and that my goal would be to work with all areas to ensure necessary controls were both efficient and effective. From my perspective, even if I hadn't gotten that job, I would have been able to confidently say that I had used the interview as an opportunity to advocate for our profession. So it's a first and foremost of importance to treat everyone with whom you come into contact professionally, courteously, and respectfully. And it also helps if you were able to convey with everyone that you have the right approach and are there to be of assistance. Also, being able to demonstrate your knowledge of the industry and business during each interaction will help cement your trusted relationships with others. One of the kindest things that someone said about my team and me when I was the North American CAE and VP of a global Japanese pharmaceutical manufacturer was that I said at the start of a project that the audit team was there to help, and in their opinion, at the end of the project, what I had said had ended up being true. There are a number of other ways to build strong professional relationships with your colleagues, and we'll discuss just a few. One of those ways is to involve key stakeholders in risk assessment. My apologies for that technical interruption. Okay, so one of the ways is to involve key stakeholders in the risk assessment and planning process, which I'm sure all of you do. Err on the side of speaking to too many people. This is a great way to be able to explain internal audit's role in the organization, the focus on all types of risks, and to demonstrate your capacity to listen to others' concerns. I've also found it helpful to assure interviewees that I will not divulge the information shared with me during the process, and I've always kept true to my word, further instilling confidence in my colleagues. Often, I would start my conversation with stakeholders with their input from our previous session, letting each interviewee know that their concerns had become part of an audit that had been performed to the extent possible. Or I would simply remind each person of their previous input and ask how perhaps their perception of risk had changed since our last meeting or stayed the same. Another way to ensure successful relationships, always let your auditee or internal audit clients, as I like to call them, know exactly how the audit process works, beginning with working together on an agreeable schedule whenever possible. Formal opening or planning meetings should describe how and when work will be performed, highlighting the fact that the internal audit client will be kept apprised of observation, and note that I did not use the term findings throughout the process. Share with the internal audit client that they will have the opportunity to view the draft of the report, discuss and provide formal responses prior to a formal report being issued, and make sure that you keep your word. Of course, field work should be conducted professionally, respectfully, and courteously by all members of the internal audit team. When it comes to reporting, be fair and balanced. Include progress made since the last review, if appropriate, and any best practices observed. If you can get away without providing a formal rating on issues and general conditions, I would suggest doing so. I am sure many of you are aware. However, for those who may not be, ratings are not required by our standards. However, they may be required in some industries by regulators. From my experience, I have found that disagreements and negotiations around formal ratings distract from the essence of observations and the action needed to resolve any potential deficiencies. Also, I find that using words to describe actual conditions is more specific, enlightening, and palatable. Another aspect of relationship building, your quality program. Once again, you have the opportunity to share with your stakeholders your own performance criteria, which is, of course, compliance with our professional standards. This is a great way to advocate for and promote our profession. And again, the more that you share with the greatest number of stakeholders, the better. Perform an annual internal assessment each year and share the detailed observations as well as an overall summary, just as you would when reporting out at the conclusion of an internal audit project. I've also taken advantage of using surveys during audit projects. I will share the survey criteria during the planning phase again, so that internal audit clients mutually understand our focus on quality and professionalism. Once the project is complete, I will request that internal audit clients rate our performance from highly satisfied to highly dissatisfied for approximately 15 factors and overall. Just some of the factors that I include in my surveys are: was the project conducted during a period that was convenient for all? Did the planning meeting adequately cover how the review would be performed? Were the internal audit client's concerns or risks taken into consideration during the review? Was the internal client kept apprised of progress during the review? Did the audit team understand the business and the area being audited? Did members of the team act professionally, respectfully, and courteously? Were issues discussed during the review? Was the draft report adequately discussed? Did the final report clearly indicate the observations discussed and agreed upon management action plans? Was the project performed efficiently? Was the final report issued timely? And finally, did the project add value to the area being reviewed? Survey results are shared with internal audit team members. However, consideration is also given regarding the objectivity of the person completing the survey. In other words, internal auditors are not penalized for any potential feedback that may be less than highly satisfied. Rather, the information is used for discussion, awareness, and potential training and development opportunities. The external quality review should be performed at least every 5 years in accordance with the standards. And this is another way to continue to build strong and valuable relationships. By nature of the external review, many stakeholders will be involved and will share their opinions through interviews and surveys. The nature of the questions themselves will further help stakeholders understand the important role that internal audit plays in our organizations. Finally, having been able to respond that you have an internal audit quality program is also a great retort when you get the question, so who audits the auditors? Also, getting back to always being professional, courteous, and respectful, it is, of course, important to understand cultural norms. I have had the opportunity to travel to a number of different countries, and at last count, I have actually worked in 27. Some of you have vastly exceeded that number, I'm sure, and others of you may be waiting for global opportunities. Regardless, I can honestly say that traveling and meeting people and exploring new areas and cultures, particularly food, has been just another benefit of working in our great profession. However, things can be very different, and you do want to do your homework before the start of a global assignment. I am sure that I have made more than my share of mistakes. However, I do try, and I think we all get some points for that. It is also important to develop relationships with your fellow internal audit colleagues, both within and outside of your organization. I think that's especially important in our profession because, due to the nature of our work and our need for independence and objectivity, we need to be able to connect with others on a deeper professional level. And we can do this by reaching out to fellow internal auditors. Joining and participating in chapter meetings and roundtables and attending conferences such as this one and training will help you stay current on evolving risk and changing tools and technologies. So far, we have talked about a couple of things that are helpful to building a long-term career in internal auditing, particularly the specific traits and characteristics one must possess, and the importance of building strong professional relationships. Now we're going to move on to staying current. As we have said, staying on top of information is critical to career success. Information about your industry, your business, and your profession. However, especially during the pandemic, it seems as though there is an avalanche of free information readily available. There is an expression that maybe you have heard, and that is sometimes more is less. So how do you ensure that you have the information that is important to ensure your continued success? First, getting back to being a continuous learner and being intellectual curious, it is important to take the time to at least scan general news sources every day. From an industry perspective, it is important to monitor those online resources and journals that provide periodic updates. And from a business perspective, if you haven't already, you can set up Google alerts or other alerts so that when your company is mentioned in the news, you can know the latest information. One of the most important areas on which to stay current, from my perspective, is the regulatory environment. Challenges may drive your risk assessment and your plan, or at the least, you will be able to make some quick hits and wins by alerting your organization. To those of you who would say, well, that's the job of the legal department or the compliance function, I would say that I would also want to know about regulatory change to ensure that I was well versed on the issue to speak with those colleagues. When I think of some of the most serious potential adverse ramifications to our organizations, non-compliance with laws and regulations is high on the list. For example, consider the fines and penalties associated with failing to comply with data privacy regulations or anti-bribery and corruption regulations. I recently conducted a webinar for the IIA on managing regulatory change, and I believe that internal audit can and should play a role in response to major regulatory initiatives by ensuring that, at the least, regulatory changes are communicated, appropriate policies and procedures are implemented, and training programs are conducted, all, of course, by the appropriate functions within the organization. Other specific areas on which to stay current: IT security frameworks, accounting pronouncements, the list is endless. Please note that all of this reading and research is to keep current on emerging issues. This is not just one subject, because that's who we're not that as a profession. One of the sources I find most useful for free general information is mondac.com. That's MONDAQ.com, if that is available to you. I put it in a resource page at the back of the slides. There you will find information by country, by topic, which is compiled primarily by legal professionals around the globe. Pertinent articles and news can be shared with your business colleagues, another way to help grow trusted professional relationships we spoke about. Speaking of the profession, it is also very important to stay abreast of changes in our profession, and these changes are much more infrequent, as many of you are aware. It is important to know our standards and related guidance, and again, these are infrequently updated. Some other more significant things that you might currently want to know about include the updated 3 lines model and information from the On-Risk 2020 report. Again, the 3 lines model link is in your resource page. So what does change constantly are the tools, technologies, and best practices available for our use. And this is not to say that you need to use all the latest and greatest available. What it does mean is that you want to be aware of the changes, evaluate new ways of doing things, and before you dive in, decide whether or not the changes would make sense and add value for you and your organization. One subject that I find that is almost constantly important and of interest is doing more with less. And although there are many resources available, here I would recommend James Patterson's book, Lean Auditing, which is available through Amazon. And you will see many thought leaders quoted in that book. I think the trick with all of this is to find a few resources and a few voices to follow to allow you to stay up to date. Otherwise, you will get lost in the noise of social media. Is this all making sense to everyone? We must continuously evolve in order to be successful. That is our strength. So far, we have discussed the characteristics that are important to success, the importance of professional relationships, and the need to stay current on changes in our external environment, industry, and business, and to adopt new tools and technologies and ways of doing things as appropriate. And that brings us to resiliency, another aspect of long-time career success. Some may speak about resiliency when it comes to dealing with external challenges, one of the most significant of which in our current environment, of course, is the pandemic and its ramifications that we're all dealing with. Others of you may have had to deal with natural disasters, acts of terror or war, and other economic or geopolitical crises. Or your organization may have suffered a significant security breach, a major fraud or restatement, any of which would result in fines, penalties, a loss of reputation, and in most extreme cases, cessation of the business. I continue to maintain that if you possess the right characteristics and skills, you have formed the right relationships, and if you are up to speed and current, as we have discussed, you will survive and grow from those challenges. As for some examples, those of you who are leading or who are in risk-based internal audit functions would have included IT and IT risks in your audit plans, and you would have audited and ensured that your business continuity and disaster recovery plans were up to date. After all, business continuity plans have been in existence since at least the 1970s, having taken root in the banking and financial services industries. You would have continuously made recommendations in your organizations to automate processes during your reviews of operations, to increase effectiveness and efficiency of internal controls and to add value. Relationships would have been developed with your colleagues such that you are looked upon as a key resource to add value to your organization during any crises. Relationships with other internal audit professionals would be providing you with best practices and information within, of course, confidentially conformance on their areas of focus and how work is being performed. And of course, given that you were up to speed in accordance with the standards, you would have a charter that specifies that you have access to all the data in your organization. And because processes were automated, you were able to continue to work, albeit on specific projects that are of the most valuable to your organization during a crisis. All of these things are challenges, yes. Handling these challenges just what you do as an internal audit professional. And it's actually an excellent opportunity to demonstrate exactly what our profession can bring to the table, not just every day, but especially during a crisis. So then, where does resilience come into play and why is it important? Because I have been in the internal audit profession for over 40 years, as I have said, I can tell you that certain events may occur in your career that can be very difficult to deal with, and I rarely hear them discussed. And for some reason, I have found that these issues may be more difficult than building and leading an internal audit functions or working through crises. A couple of issues I have faced during my career: discrimination early on as a female in a once male dominated business environment. So how did I address this? I addressed this by working harder, completing my first MBA program, earning my first certification, the CBA, Chartered Bank Auditor, and finding a mentor. I have experienced retaliation after refusing to participate in efforts to terminate a colleague based on racial discrimination. How did I deal with this? I spoke up, found another position, and left that organization. I have even experienced physical intimidation during a review of cash controls. This issue was brought to and handled by the organization's security department. I have also experienced workplace bullying a couple of times when working for insecure leaders. In one instance, I went on to lead the internal audit function, and in another, I used the experience to demonstrate to more junior team members how to address the behavior and rise above it. I bring these few examples to you today to demonstrate the importance of resilience, the ability to adapt and bounce back and become stronger than you were before. I can tell you through my experience that staying true to your values, maintaining your integrity, finding support through your relationships, and taking care of physical needs, including getting sleep, exercise, and eating healthily, are critical during periods of adversity and stress. I can also share with you that it's important to have a personal brand, having researched and spoken on this topic in the past in order to survive some of these temporary career setbacks. So, what do I mean by personal brand? Personal brand is a term that was first used by Dr. Tom Pierce, an American writer on business management, best known for the book In Search of Excellence, which he co-authored with Robert Waterman. In an article in Fast Company in 1997, Dr. Peters said, regardless of age, regardless of position, regardless of the business we happen to be in, all of us need to understand the importance of branding. We are CEOs of our own companies, Me Inc. To be in business today, our most important job is to be head marketer for the brand called you. So, what is your personal brand? It's your authentic personal image. It's what makes you unique. It's your professional presence. It's your reputation. And it's your internet presence on social media. And just to clarify what personal brand is not, because sometimes people think that this could be, but it isn't. It's not about bragging. It's not self-promotion. It's not about attention seeking. And it's not about creating self-centered connections. As someone once said, and unfortunately the author is unknown, if you don't create your own brand, someone else will. I hope that you can see that having a personal brand is especially important during stressful times in your career. Regardless of what you're going to go through, people will already know who you are and they will be able to offer support. If you're wondering about building your personal brand, here are some steps that may be helpful. First, in developing your personal brand, you will have to do some homework and self-introspection to truly identify both your strengths and your weaknesses. You need to determine who and what you aspire to be. What do you want to be known for? You need to determine if there's anything about you and your brand that you need to work on and change so that you are known for what you want to be known for. You will need to know your passions, your strengths to determine how you can use these to make an impact. Your brand is actually built from the inside out. What is it about your values, your personality, your knowledge, your experience that makes you authentic and unique? What are your strengths, your benefits that you bring to a role? And what is it that differentiates you? What do you deliver? You also need to determine your own style and present that style. Another good suggestion is to ask others, perhaps colleagues, mentors, friends, partners, family members, anyone you trust, what they see as your strengths, values, skills, and abilities. If this does not align with what you want your personal brand to be, take appropriate action to make the necessary changes in how you present yourself. You can also start with what's called the elevator pitch, that short, concise message about you and why you are unique and different. A good example of where this elevator pitch or key message should appear is in your LinkedIn summary page or on a bio page on a blog. Besides being helpful during a crisis, your personal brand can lead to notoriety outside of your place of employment. You can stand out as someone who truly knows and advocates the profession of internal auditing by participating and taking a leadership role in your local chapter or on a board committee or making a contribution. And by doing so, you can be viewed as a thought leader, especially by offering fresh perspectives. Also, once you have developed your personal brand by evaluating your unique strengths and weaknesses and determining where you want to be and gaining notoriety in your profession, you would be more readily able to determine if you are in the right role, in the right level, working with people with whom you want to work. You will hopefully be able to make the changes you need to ensure you are in a role where you are truly happy, resulting in a higher level in performance, engagement, and success. Also, your personal brand can accelerate the advancement of your career. If you live consistently by what you brand, people will come to trust you, your brand, and they will buy into you just like they would buy into a product, increasing your chances for promotion, for inclusion in complex projects, and for interesting volunteer opportunities. If you are actively seeking a position or a different position, having defined who you are and where you can best utilize your strengths will better enable you to determine whether potential position will be right for you. And finally, if you noticed, we touched on the relationship between your personal brand and social media. LinkedIn can be a particularly valuable tool to both demonstrate your education, your experience, your certification, and values, and to build relationships. And hopefully you've built those relationships over time, looking at how you can serve others and not thinking about what you can get from them. In conclusion, these are the things that I have learned throughout my career that I have shared with you. The first, internal audit is a profession with a mission and standards that may be updated, but the essence or focus of our profession does not change over time. The second, there are certain characteristics and qualifications that successful CAEs possess. And because we are part of a profession, we also see that successful CAOs are educated and certified. Third, relationships are key, both within our organizations and other stakeholders and with our fellow internal auditors. And to build strong relationships, we must be professional, courteous, and respectful. Fourth, staying current is key in our profession, your industry, and your organization. Finding the sources and voices to follow are critical to cutting through the noise from information overload. And finally, resilience. Resilience to handle the significant challenges and career roadblocks that come your way. So, in summary, I will leave you with a simple model, which I'll call CRCR, to hopefully help you remember some of the pillars of a successful career in internal audit, which is C, for characteristics that you have or develop. R, for relationships that you build and maintain. C, for being current in your profession, your industry, and your organizational knowledge. And R, for being resilient no matter what comes your way. Again, it has been my honor to be here with you, and it is my sincere hope that at least some of the information that I have shared from my long career may be helpful to you. And on that note, I will turn our program back to our moderator for some questions. However, if we don't get to your questions, please feel free to reach out. My contact information is on the last page of the presentation. So again, I thank you very much. Shukran jazilan. Thank you.
Miss Nancy, shukran jazilan to you. It was a wonderful session. It was very, very informative. I am sure that all attendees have got tips to carry back with them and implement at work, especially regarding the characteristics of CAEs and building relationships, which are the keys to CAE career success. Besides talking frankly about resilience and tips for building your brand. We really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Looking forward to your cooperation with us in other events. Thank you very much.